Chapter 12. Beyond the Beyond. Pono came in to wake me well before sunrise, as she explained she would last night. In her words, it was important to get to the site early and soften into the space. I was a bit sleepy, but came to life rather quickly due to a blend of nerves and excitement. Heavy on the nerves. I still didn't know what to expect today, but somewhere inside I knew it was probably better that I didn't. I had made a courageous decision and was proud of myself for it, so I didn't want to give myself any room to wiggle free. I didn't need to know every detail of the day ahead. I trust Pono and Kaitiki will guide me as I need. As I prepared, I looked over at my dress that was hanging on the back of the door. It was so thoughtful and generous of Kaitiki to bring me that dress, but I was intimidated by the thought of wearing it. It was gorgeous, but not something I'd ever even attempt to pull off. It was fairly simple and cut conservatively, which made sense for such an occasion, but it still had a certain energy to it, like something a person of royalty would wear, maybe a princess or a queen even. I decided I would wait until I was completely done with everything else before I tried it on, but after a quick glance around the room, I realized there was nothing else to do. I needed almost nothing for the event, except this dress. I let out a sigh and grabbed it off the door. I put it on carefully, being sure not to rip or wrinkle her spectacular work. Once it was on, I looked down at myself and tried to gauge. It was my only option, so it didn't matter whether I liked it, but of course I wanted to look halfway presentable. I turned to the mirror for a more formal assessment. As expected, it felt inappropriate. Not because it was too revealing or anything like that, but because it was just made for a different type of girl with a different type of body. It fit well, with not too much emphasis on my less than ideal figure, but like usual, I was unhappy with what I saw in the mirror. Just then I heard a knock on the door. "Come in," I called out. "Happy rising, Sandra," Pono greeted me as she entered the room. "Oh, the dress looks fabulous." I don't know," I responded as I looked down and pulled the sides out a little with each arm. "I'm not sure I can pull it off." "Why do you say that?" Because," I said. "Look at me. I don't have the Okablo body this dress was made for." Pono looked me up and down, then turned me by the shoulder to see the back. She lifted my chin up with her finger, rolled my shoulders back, and placed her hands on my lower back and belly, cueing me to stand upright. I responded to the cueing the best I could, but it only lasted a few moments before I felt myself return to my typical posture. "What is this all about?" she asked. "What's what all about?" "This," she said again, waving fingers around my chest and shoulders. "You're slumping even more than usual." "Am I? I didn't know I slumped at all." "Yes, you do, especially when we talk about your body. I also see it when Kaitiki is around. You see her, and suddenly you're pulling down your shirt, slumping your shoulders, and crossing your arms," she shared. "You're hiding." "Really?" I asked, once again reminded that Pono was watching me much more closely than she lets me know. "Yes, really," she said very positively. "Tell me, Sandra, what do you feel when you look at her?" "Who? Kaitiki?" I responded as I shuffled my feet uncomfortably. "I don't know. I mean, she's just so stunning and strong and graceful. I guess it makes me feel a little insecure and embarrassed." "Embarrassed?" "Yeah, I know I shouldn't compare, but it's impossible not to," I confessed. "I don't know how she does it." "Well, I do," she answered confidently. "I happen to know that Kaitiki, like every Okablo woman, focuses on what her body can do more than what it looks like. And to make sure she is prepared to fully experience all the joy life has to offer, she makes sure her body is well-tuned, well-fed, well-rested, and, of course, loved," she explained in her trademark, lovingly honest tone. "And luckily, it just so happens that it's from this mental and emotional state that the physical body develops and transforms into its most beautiful self." "That seems too simple to be the answer," I responded. Of course it's simple. We are talking about nature, right? It's always simple. If it's not simple, it's not natural, she explained. But also remember, simple does not always mean easy. Right. Did you hear that last part about her body feeling loved? That's the key, and that's the hard part for the women from your land. Like you, they fall victim to comparison, shaming themselves for not resembling the women they see on TV and in magazines. And when they see themselves, they look right past the beauty and abilities of their body, seeing only their self-perceived lack. Yep, that's me to a T, I replied sadly as I looked down at the floor. I know, she answered tender-heartedly as she placed both her hands on my shoulders and dropped her gaze down to make eye contact. It's hard. The cultural pressures are nearly impossible to conquer if you are unequipped. It's a practice, just like everything else. It requires a subconscious rewiring and a deep spiritual connection. She reached her index finger under my chin and lifted it up, regaining eye contact. Tell me, Sandra, how do you feel when you look at yourself in the mirror? Ooh, that's not an easy answer, I started, not really wanting to delve into such a heavy topic. I wasn't expecting it to be easy. Clearly, she wasn't going to let me wiggle free from the discussion. How do I feel? I don't know. It's hard to put into words. I guess I feel frustrated and annoyed, kind of, I shared. I don't hate myself or anything like that, but it just feels like no matter what I do, I can never have that look. It's always felt like I'm never enough. I paused to feel into the answer a bit further. I don't know where it comes from, but ever since I can remember, I can only see my imperfections and insecure qualities. No matter what, that never seems to change. She sounded. It's like a curse of my own self-judgment. First, I get upset with how I look, and then I get even more upset for judging myself based on how I look. It's like a vicious cycle that makes me, honestly, angry. You're saying always, Pono asked in reply. When did you first start looking in the mirror closely each day? I'm not sure, maybe 4th or 5th grade. That's when I remember spending any significant time in the mirror, at least. And these feelings, were they present then? Yeah, I think so. I don't ever remember a time where I looked in the mirror and felt really happy about what I saw. I don't think it's ever happened. Even when I'm all dressed up and feeling better than usual, it's still a feeling of like, I guess this is just the best I can do. Is that how you feel today when you wear this dress? I looked down one more time and responded, yes, that's exactly how I feel. Thank you for being so open with me, she replied, keeping her hands on my shoulders and holding caring eye contact. But I promise you, you look beautiful. Thank you, I responded sincerely, appreciating Pono very much in this moment. It's crucial that this becomes part of your work, she emphasized. The level of love you can spread throughout the world will be dictated by the level of love you see within yourself. When we arrived at the Maloka, it was still pitch black, but there was a fire out front and countless candles lining the walkway and entrance. I removed my shoes and entered the space respectfully. The room was very dark, but what must have been hundreds of candles lit the room, creating an ambiance of peace and tranquility. Even though I couldn't see all of the instruments and decorations anymore, it was just as inviting as yesterday when I made my commitment to join. I stood in the entrance and scanned the room slowly. Even though I was nervous, I felt calm and completely at ease. I hardly knew what to expect or understood any of the things they were doing around the room to prepare, but it didn't matter. I felt safe and protected by the facilitators in a whole new way. I had an unshakable sense of faith and trust in the group. There was low, angelic music playing in the background, and the facilitators and attendees who were arriving were virtually silent, only exchanging whispers when necessary. I saw Lalita and Lala in their white gowns laying flowers all along the walkway and around the main altar at the center. They looked not only beautiful because of their appearance, but because of the way they carried themselves in the maloka, with such grace and honor as they prepared the space. "Are the girls going to be joining us?" I whispered to Pono. "No, not yet," she answered. "A few more years still. They will just be here to assist with the opening and closing prayers." "Oh, gotcha," I replied, followed immediately by a soft tap on my shoulder. I turned around to see Kaitiki with a huge smile on her face and her arms outstretched, inviting me in for a big hug. I squeezed her firmly, silently expressing my gratitude for being here with her and my excitement for the day ahead. While our heads were close together, she whispered in my ear, "We have some time before we begin. Let's take a walk down to the beach." I nodded in acceptance, and we quietly exited the room. It was a several-minute walk down to the water, and the first light of day was just bright enough to guide us, even though the sun hadn't quite cracked the horizon yet. "What a beautiful morning," I said out loud as we approached the water. "Rising, Sandra," Kaitiki replied. "Of all days, today is even more important than usual to watch your language." "Watch my language?" I asked puzzledly. "What did I say?" "Morning," she replied. "This is the most magnificent time of the day. It is a time of new beginnings and limitless potential. Just look around." She reached her arms out wide and twirled around a couple of times, looking up at the sky. "This is not a time for mourning. This is a time for rising and celebrating." "Oh, is that why everyone around here always says happy rising or grand rising?" "Mm-hmm. Our words are spells, and it's important to be mindful of the language we choose." "Oh, okay. I will try to remember," I answered. "Speaking of rising, look," she said as she pointed toward the horizon. "There he is, grandfather's son, coming into view for the first time today." I looked out and could see a deep golden-orange sliver of sun peeking over the horizon. We both just stopped and stared silently for several minutes as the sliver grew bigger and the glow became brighter. Soon, the sun was almost entirely in view, at which point I shared with Kaitiki, "I don't see many sunrises, but when I do, they are always breathtaking." "Mm-hmm," she sounded in agreement. "I can't help but get lost in the wonder of the universe," I continued. "In just these few minutes, we've stood dead still, yet the sun has come completely into view. To the uneducated eye, it would appear that the sun is the one moving, but really it is us who is moving. And not just moving, but rolling forward toward it at nearly 1,000 miles per hour, I emphasized. Yet we feel nothing." I spread out my arms wide and looked directly out toward the sun. "In the past, I'd only be able to see this through the scientific lens," I continued. "I'd only think about how amazing we are to be able to figure out and understand such a phenomenon, even though we cannot see it or feel it whatsoever." I kept holding my arms out, soaking in the warm golden rays. "But now you and Pono are helping me connect to the world around me in a much deeper way. I'm seeing it differently. No, I'm feeling it differently. In this moment, I see nature as the magnificent one, and even though we are a major part of it, we are not at all above it." I looked over at Kaitiki. "I'm starting to get a stronger sense of the magic and the wonder, you know? I'm allowing myself to feel the awe of the mystery." "Sandra, that is so beautiful. It's these exact types of perspective shifts that transform a person. Subtle, yet profound. I am so happy to have played a role in your journey this week," she said as she turned and gave me a long hug. After we broke the hug, she asked, "Want to know what I love most about the sunrise?" "What's that?" "See how the light from the sun is dancing along the top of the water in a direct line right at us?" she asked as she pointed along the water toward the now fully visible sun. "Yes," I responded, noticing the narrow streak of glowing light beaming right at us, something I'd seen many times before, albeit mostly in magazines and photographs. It's an image that is synonymous with sunrises and sunsets. It appears to be shining right toward us like we are the only ones on Earth, she continued. It's like the sun was made just to shine his light on us and us alone. Okay, I answered, not really following, but knowing there had to be more coming. Now walk over there, she said, pointing down the beach. I turned and walked down about 100 feet, then spun back toward her. Now look at the sun again, she yelled. What do you see? I turned and looked back at the sun. It was still sending a golden lane of light right toward me. The light is shining directly at me now, I answered loudly. And it's also still shining directly at me, she yelled back. I paused, slightly perplexed. This was clearly an optical illusion, but I'd never noticed it before. Now walk back toward me and keep your eyes on it, she shouted. As I walked back, I noticed, to my amazement, that the streak of light followed me in perfect timing with my stride. The size didn't change, but no matter where I stood, it appeared that the light was shining perfectly on me and me alone. Once again, this is something I've seen before, everyone has, but I never stopped to experience it in this way. As I got back to Kaitiki, she finished explaining her thoughts. When I walk in the light, it appears that the light is shining directly onto me, keeping me warm, lighting my path, and guiding my way, as if I'm the single most important person in the universe, she said. Do you know why? No. Why? Because I am. I turned and wrinkled my brow, confused if there was more to this or if Kaitiki was actually extremely pompous. But when you, or anyone else on Earth, walks in this same way, the light shines onto you, keeps you warm, lights your path, and guides your way just the same. As if you are the most important person in the universe, she elaborated. Because you are. If that was supposed to make it more clear, it didn't. Do you understand, Sandra? She asked. Both are true, you see? The light is infinite. It provides for you as if you are the single most significant person on Earth. It gives you all that you need and creates all that you have. You are showered in the endless abundance of its energy and unconditional love of its warmth. All of this while supplying the exact same thing to every other person who stands below. She looked out at the horizon and smiled. We are each the most important person on Earth, yet equally important as every other person, you see? We are each the center of our own universe. The eternal flame shines for us all, she said as she turned to me. We are all loved the same, unconditionally. We are all his children. I looked out over the glistening water as I listened. Honestly, her message still wasn't entirely clear, but I felt her words deeply. She spoke with so much conviction and passion, it was inspiring. Despite how far I've come this week, wisdom like this shows me how much further I can still deepen my connection. I hope to someday be able to actually feel the magnitude of what she just described. Wow, Kaitiki, thank you so much for sharing that. It's such a profound perspective. I don't even know what to say other than happy rising. We both laughed out loud. You learn fast, Sandra. I'm impressed by you. You've come a long way this week, and I think there's a lot more to come for you here. I appreciate that, Kaitiki, but this is the end of the line for me, I explained. It's funny. On the first day, Pono referred to this trip as a journey of transformation, and I almost laughed. But she was right. It's been a heck of a week. I've gotten so much more than I bargained for. I'm going home as a new person, and my life will never be the same after this. I understand, but it's not over yet, she replied with a smirk. Today is going to be transformational for you, without a doubt. To what degree? I don't know, but I promise there is still more growth to come. What would you say determines the degree? I asked curiously. You, she responded. It will depend on how honestly you look at the things that are presented to you, and how willing you are to surrender. That seems to be your answer to everything, I said playfully. Surrender. That's not my answer, that's just the answer, she said, and you'll get a lot of practice today. I don't know if I like the sound of that, I answered as a rush of nervous energy came over me. I feel like I'm going into this thing kind of blind. Can you give me a rundown of what to expect? Maybe some tips? Sure, but let's walk back up as I do. We turned and started walking back toward the Maloka. Kaitiki took a deep breath before beginning. So it's actually somewhat intentional to come into today without knowing every single detail. That might sound crazy, but it's part of the process of learning how to trust us and yourself. If people start obsessing over every single detail and creating some kind of expectation, it could cause a lot of friction in their mind if it doesn't all go as planned. Doesn't go as planned? I asked nervously. You realize that this is not making me feel better, right? She laughed as if I was kidding, although I wasn't, and then kept explaining. The medicine is in charge, not us. It will guide us if we listen, but if we try to control the journey, it will be a very challenging road ahead. We stepped over the roots of palm trees at the top of the beach and found our way to the path that led back to the Maloka. But anyway, the rundown is simple. We'll open with some prayer and song, and then we'll serve the medicine. You'll get a dose that is appropriate for your experience level right now. Which is how much exactly? Just trust, she answered with a smile. And then you'll have time to sit in your space and just be. The medicine will guide you. Just connect with your breath, be in your body, and allow whatever needs to move to do so. So just sit there and wait? Yeah, pretty much. We'll give you an eye mask that will help keep you focused inward and not get distracted by the external environment, she informed me. Just sit or lay and surrender. When the fear creeps in, don't run, don't resist. Imagine yourself falling asleep and drifting away. Soften into it and let it wrap you in its arms. Allow yourself to be swept away into the divine flow. Okay, I think I can do that. Anything else? For you, the next big thing is going to be turning off that logical brain. What do you mean? It's important not to try and make sense of what's happening or figure things out, she said with air quotes. The answers and insights will come when they are ready. Just be patient. They will come in much different ways than you are used to. And if you get caught up trying to make logical sense of the experience, you'll miss out on the beauty of the flow. You want to be fully present. That's where the magic happens. Okay, I will try, but you know I overanalyze everything. No try, she snapped. Opposite of try. Allow. Allow. Okay, got it. And the next thing I would say is to release whatever needs to be released, however it is asking to be released. Laugh, cry, dance, sing, purge, whatever the body asks for. Purge, I asked. You mean like vomit? Mm-hmm. Purging can often be the highlight of ceremony for me. It's when I know I'm really clearing out the big stuff. I didn't answer, but I was really hoping not to purge. And lastly, be sure to have fun. Rest, relax, and enjoy it. There will be beautiful music, amazing people, and moments of pure bliss. Soak it in. It's where the healing happens. Okay, that I can do. Bliss out. That's what I want. Well, she giggled. You might not get what you want, but one thing for absolute certain is that you'll get what you need. This time, before entering back into the Maloka, we were each held outside the door for a moment by one of the facilitators, who burned sage all around our heads and bodies. Kaitiki explained to me that this is called smudging, and it was a ritual to clear the body of any negative or unwanted energy before entering the sacred space. We each took a turn, one by one, and as we stepped into the room afterward, the ceremony was now officially underway. We each sat facing the altar on one of the soft rectangular carpet mats that were spread around the room. Kaitiki sat next to me and offered to kindly guide and instruct me through the traditions and rituals as needed. This was very helpful, but generally speaking, I still felt very much like a fish out of water. There were probably between 20 to 25 people in the room total, which included Pono, who seemed to be leading the flow of the ceremony, even though her parents sat at the head of the room in very distinguished garb. They were not as active, but their presence was very much felt. There were a few other males that seemed to be assisting in facilitation as well. About a dozen or so other Okablos, Kelly, who's sort of an Okablo now, and then 7 or 8 other Delphins waiting nervously on their mats like me. Even though her parents were the lead facilitators, Pono was doing most of the speaking, and after some drumming, Okablo prayers, and a song, she invited us all to sit silently for a few moments and find our intention for the ceremony. I hollowed out, like I've been practicing, and did a brief scan of my body from head to toe, ensuring I felt empty and clear. Once I was clear, my intention came easy. It was right in line with the theme of the week, and something Kaitiki made very clear would be important for me today. My intention was simply to surrender, to let go and allow the medicine to guide me, allow the people in this room to support me, and allow myself to receive what was meant to find me. Being my first time with this work, I didn't know what else to do anyway, so I decided to keep my focus on this one simple intention within my control. A few moments later, they came around to each of us with a small wooden bowl that contained the medicine. I looked down in my bowl and saw what I expected: several long, puffy mushroom stems with little caps on top. What I didn't expect was how much it was. I really didn't know how to gauge, but it sure seemed like a lot for a newbie like me, and this momentarily took me out of my calm and clear state and put a knot in my stomach. My fear subsided a little as I peeked over at Kaitiki's bowl, who had easily twice as much. Sensing my fear, she leaned toward me with a reassuring whisper, "Trust." Pono reminded the group to receive the medicine as sacrament and invited us to commune when we felt ready. I watched a few others slowly begin chewing and swallowing the medicine, including Pono, Kaitiki, their parents, and the rest of the facilitators. I found this surprising and a little unsettling. I was unsure of how they would manage the group this way, but just replayed Kaitiki's whisper in my mind. Trust. I took my first piece, bit the cap off, and chewed. It didn't taste great. It was very dry, chewy, and earthy. I reminded myself that this was sacrament and tried not to get caught up in the taste. After a few bites, I became accustomed to it and continued slowly chewing and swallowing in silence, along with the rest of the group. Moments later, I looked down and saw that my bowl was empty. I took a sip from my water bottle and looked over at Kaitiki, who placed both of her hands over her heart and smiled at me. I mimicked her gesture, slid my eye mask down, laid back on my mat, and waited. I tried not to overthink, like Kaitiki suggested, but it must have been at least 20 to 25 minutes since we communed, and so far, nothing. The room was virtually silent aside from the rustling of people periodically moving from lying to sitting and vice versa, trying to get comfortable. I was becoming a little anxious in anticipation and was more than ready for something to happen. Anything, really. Finally, I heard some rattles beginning to play softly. I had my eye mask on, so I wasn't sure who was playing, but it sounded like at least 2 or 3 different rattles shaking in unison, like a slow drum beat. Not long after the rattles started, drums joined in. They started slow and low, but gradually picked up pace and rhythm, vibrating the entire room and echoing a pulse I could feel throughout my entire body. The rattling continued at a steady pace, but the drumming intensified rapidly. I think it was only one person drumming, but it could have easily been 3 or 4. It was hard to tell. I didn't like it. It was so loud, it was almost irritable. and the vibration was so low and deep that it radiated through my chest and head. The bass pounded off the walls, bouncing back from every direction, completely engulfing me in a pounding beat. I rolled over from my back to my belly and covered my head with my hands, trying to find relief from the overwhelming sound, but no relief. I tried sitting up, but that didn't help either, and whoever was playing the drum was moving slowly around the room, spending a few moments playing directly over each person. I knew this because even when I thought it couldn't get any louder, it amplified even more as the drum played above my head. I laid down on my back again, squirming restlessly. As I laid, I felt something starting to happen internally. I think the medicine was kicking in. I felt myself sort of slip back and retreat inward into my own body, creating a shrinking feeling, with my body expanding outward all around me. It felt like my mind was very tiny and floating inside a huge dark cave that was my body. I lay perfectly still, but there was a distinct feeling of motion. It was as if I was being propelled forward toward an endless void of blackness. I absolutely did not want to go there, but I had no choice. It felt like I was on a ride I couldn't get off. My heart beat faster and I could hear it echoing through my body, even over the drum beat. My breathing felt rapid and shallow and my body was restless. I was completely overtaken by fear. I tried to relax, but it was hopeless. The ride was only getting more terrifying and there was no stop button. Suddenly, the endless pit of darkness that I was hurling toward but somehow never seemed to reach began to transition into bright colors. They came in from all sides, even from behind me somehow, and in a perplexing way seemed to be both very close to me and extremely far away at the same time. They pulsated in varying brightness and alternated in and out of every shade on the spectrum, at some points displaying all of them at once. It was like tumbling around inside of a kaleidoscope with endless patterns of vivid colors and geometric patterns weaving in and out of each other, reflecting in every direction. And I wasn't just seeing these colors, I was drowning in them, completely immersed from top, bottom, left, and right like a three-dimensional wave pool. I clenched my hands and feet tightly, and I could feel my jaw clamping down. As I squeezed, a giant hole opened up in the sea of colors, and I began moving toward it and through it rapidly. It was like a wormhole into the abyss of nothingness, pulling me down deeper and deeper, twisting and turning and spiraling me along with no end in sight and no beginning to go back to. It was like being teleported through the never-ending space of the cosmos in a glowing neon tube. I gripped the floor with my hands in an attempt to stop myself from going deeper. My fingernails dug into the wood and every muscle in my body contracted to its fullest. My mind was racing with confusion and regret. What the fuck am I doing? Why did I agree to this? I didn't think this through. I didn't do enough research or ask enough questions. I just followed. Just trust, they said. Just trust. Well, I fucking trusted, and now look, I'm losing control. I sat up straight and slid my mask up off my eyes and onto my forehead. I scanned the room quickly, noticing almost everyone on the floor in a similar state, writhing in fear and discomfort. This can't be right. Something must be wrong. Holy shit, please make this stop. I looked at the drummers, two men who were hopping and twirling as they pounded their instruments. At first, I thought they were wearing masks, but they weren't. Their faces had changed, or at least looked like they had. I hardly recognized them. They looked 1,000 years old, like an ancient totem pole, and the shape of their heads seemed to be morphing as I watched, their ears elongating and facial structure becoming something of a different time, or a different world, almost like an avatar. I was petrified with fear. What the fuck is happening? I unexpectedly burped very loudly, like an explosion from the deepest part of my intestines that sounded demonic and released a horrible stench. And then another, and the last one more like a dry heave than a burp. I pulled my mask back down, rolled onto my stomach, and once again covered my head with my hands. With my mask on, I was once again back in the ocean of symmetrical shapes swirling around me and bouncing off each other infinitely in all directions like a funhouse mirror. Then I heard a loud groaning that momentarily drowned out the drums. At first I thought it was Kaitiki, but I then realized it was actually me. I let out another long moan of agony, bellowing from deep inside. It was such a low and disturbing sound I could not believe it was actually me. I rolled onto my back to try and escape the terror. How much time is left? I thought. This has to be over soon. I lost all track of time. We could have been 10 minutes in. It could have been 3 hours. All I could do was hang on for dear life and hope for it to be over. Suddenly, I felt a hand gently touch my arm. I lifted my mask and peeked underneath. It was Pono. Thank God. I had never been so happy to see someone in my life. She must be here to help. She must know how to make it stop. Sandra, she whispered as she knelt next to me. How are you doing? Was she serious? Could she not tell how I was doing? Not good, I answered with a tone of terror, reaching out for her hands. What are you feeling? I feel terrified, I replied, like I'm losing control, like I'm on a ride I can't get off and I just want it to stop. You are not losing control, but you are relinquishing it temporarily, she explained. As I looked at her face, it slowly morphed in and out between the Pono I knew and some kind of interdimensional doppelganger with the same features as the drummers. The medicine is in control now, she answered. It wants to do its work. It wants to show you the way. She took my hands that were gripping hers tightly, opened them up, and placed them palms down on my heart, and then laid hers softly on top of them. It's asking for your trust. I didn't answer. I couldn't answer. Trusting is exactly what got me in this mess, and I've never so badly wanted to turn back time and make a different decision. Forget the healing. I felt fine when I got off the plane, and I'd still be totally fine without any of this. I don't know why I let her convince me I was in need of healing in the first place. Is it almost over? I asked, the only thing that mattered to me. No, Pono responded firmly. I just want it to be over, I said to her, re-grabbing her hands that were on my chest and squeezing them tight. I just want to get out of here. She gently removed her hands from atop mine, reached up slowly, and lovingly lowered my eye mask back down over my eyes as I lay. Sandra, she whispered in my ear, the only way out is through. The only way out is through, I whispered back to Pono. It helped me calm down, just for a second, until for some reason she just left. She just kissed my forehead lightly and disappeared, sending me right back into a state of panic. I didn't realize how much her presence had helped until she was gone and my body retracted back into a tightened knot. Then it clicked. The clenching, squeezing, squirming, gripping. I was resisting. I was running away. I was trying to hold on to the reality around me that I was comfortable with, the reality that I knew as real. I was terrified of this new world, of this new state of awareness. I wasn't surrendering at all. I was too afraid. It was all fear. Finally, the drums stopped. I had never been so happy to hear silence. I lifted my eye mask just enough to glance over at Kaitiki. Clearly she was having an entirely different experience than me. She was in a kneeling position, slightly leaned forward like Puma had taught us, with her feet tucked under her butt, her chest tall and proud. Her chin was pulled back slightly, lifting the crown of her head high towards the ceiling and lengthening her spine to its fullest. Her eyes were closed lightly, her lips sealed softly, and her breath gently flowed in and out of her nostrils. There was a glowing white and purple aura surrounding her and radiating in all directions, with shiny golden wisps of light hovering around her head. Like nothing I've ever seen, she sat like a queen on her throne, in her power, taking up her space without impeding on anyone else's, without apology or guilt. Her lower half was rooted firmly to the earth, while her upper half reached high to the sky. Without even thinking, I instinctively knew I should mimic her position of power. Her energy grabbed a hold of mine, and my body began to move on its own. Totally outer body, I was just a passenger. But it was hard. I felt heavy and nauseous as the colors continued to swirl through my visual field, making me clumsy. Eventually, I got to a seated position, but I was slumped forward and compressed. My breath felt labored and trapped in my chest, forcing my mouth to hang open. After a few moments of recovery in the seated position, I was able to roll forward onto my knees, where I tucked my feet under my butt, let my hips roll back into their sockets, and pressed my knees firmly into my mat. I was basically in what's called a child's pose in yoga, about halfway to my goal of Kaitiki's throne position. I stayed there, just trying to ground myself and escape the feelings of doom that were still very present. Luckily, from this position, I was able to tune in much better. I noticed a communication channel was opening between my mind and my body. As I pushed back into the position deeper, a tense pain in my hips caused me to wince, but also set off a profound light bulb that I wasn't expecting. I learned that the wincing was another form of tensioning. The pain in my hips didn't mean they were actually hurt. They were just scared to be in this position. I got the message as clear as could be. The pain was actually fear. Simultaneously, I noticed my breath becoming shorter and more shallow as the discomfort in my hips worsened, staying high up in my chest and throat. The fear state remained. My forehead was now on the ground, eye mask on, in a tense and restricted version of child's pose. My attention came back to my visual field, still saturated with swirling shapes and colors that kept the nausea coming in and out. In the next instant, the wormhole opened up again and I could feel it trying to suck me in. With my head down and my hips now up, the sensation was pulling me forward and over the top, like I was doing a somersault back into my own body. Like before, I fought. I pushed my hands into the ground and resisted the inward pull. I lifted my head up and shook it back and forth, creating an image in my mind of my childhood dog when he would resist his bath. Again, I was doing the opposite of surrendering. I couldn't have been fighting any harder. Remembering how frustrating and aggravating my dog was in those moments, I now understood how the medicine felt. It was trying to help me, trying to show me, trying to guide me, and I would not allow it. So I finally did what I told myself I would do when I set my intention, and surrendered. With one long and audible exhale, I completely let go, releasing all of the tension in my body and allowing it to melt like a puddle deeper into my kneeling pose. It felt like I was giving up, but in a positive way, throwing in the towel on the fight and saying, "Go ahead, I'm yours." As I released the tension, everything changed in an instant. Instead of being sucked or pulled down the dark tunnel into my soul, it opened up with bright white light, and I glided down into it slowly and peacefully, like I was drifting in a parachute. I sank into a deep state of relaxation, and although I didn't see any faces or distinct people, I got an undeniable sense that I was being welcomed by or angels of some sort. Almost like walking into a welcome party. The feeling was that they were in a state of jubilation as they opened up the gates to my soul and ushered me in. I felt a sense of joy, excitement, and even relief, as if they've been eagerly awaiting an eternity for me to finally arrive, but in no way angry for me for being so late. Explaining the feelings would be impossible, but there was a sense of knowingness that came with every feeling inside. No need to interpret the feelings, no need to decipher the messages, and more than anything, no need to doubt the reality. It was all as real as could be, more real, actually, than anything I had ever experienced in what I would have, prior to today, referred to as real life. What I thought was a wormhole, I now understood as a portal into my subconscious, a new dimension I've never visited, but could not have felt more familiar. It was like I'd spent years inside already. Lifetimes, maybe. Time slowed down, or maybe stopped altogether, as I dissolved inward into myself, disintegrating the walls between my body, mind, and soul, and unifying into one singular mass of consciousness. I just kept breathing, long, slow breaths, and descending more deeply into a state of total peace. Unfortunately, what seemed like it would never end came to a halt as the inward descent stopped short, like I hit a wall. As this happened, a lucid image came right into my mind. It was a crystal clear depiction of a dam blocking a river's flow. The water was backed up and pressure was building. Without having to actually think at all, I knew this was a representation of my breath being trapped in my chest. The breath was trying to flow down deeper into my lower abdomen and hips, but tension in my chest was trapping it. Again, without needing even a second to decipher the image, I was made aware that this blockage was, of course, fear. This wasn't about the momentary terror that I was battling with during the beginning of this ceremony. I understood right away that this was more about a broad and general fear, an anxiety in my body and my breathing pattern that was preventing me from moving the energy all the way down to where it wanted to be. It went without saying that this has been affecting me for a long, long time. I paused and took note of this blockage and tried to let out a long exhale, but nothing gave. Oh, right, I was trying. No trying, I have to allow. Then I let go and relaxed my lower back and belly, giving the air a place to flow deeper. The answer I got was a yes. I had the right idea, but when I tried to do this, I felt the pain in my hips shoot up into my lower back, causing me to once again clench in fear. Without a moment of concern, I followed the instructions I was being given. Those instructions were to slowly rock back deeper, oscillating lightly up and down, reassuring my pelvis that it was safe to be here. I eased back ever so softly, like I was rocking a crying baby to sleep, even unconsciously making the shh, shh, shh sound as I comforted my scared hips. I would have been confused as to where these instructions were coming from if it wasn't so vividly clear that this was the medicine guiding me, just like Pono told me it would. I didn't question it, and I sure as hell didn't doubt. There was no mistaking that this was an intelligence of another kind. Finally, the breath began to move down and back, low into my pelvis, expanding my lower back and my belly to full capacity and creating an even distribution of outward pressure in all directions. The pressure opened up more space, allowing my hips to rotate further back into their sockets, and my lower spine slid securely in between them, amplifying the state of safety exponentially. I rolled my hips back and forth ever so gently, still hushing the baby softly. The crying had almost completely subsided, and as my hips rolled, I saw the image of the river again, now flowing fully as the breath moved down lower into my sacrum. A warm rush of energy flooded my lower body that could only be described as love. My hips felt fluid and loose, like my capsules were a warm blanket and my femur heads were nestling into the corners. Again, I heard a moaning sound that echoed all around me, but this time it was not of agony, it was of ecstasy, and once again, it was me. I pulled my arms inside my thighs, packing my entire body tightly inside of itself like a turtle in its shell. The inward pulling sensation felt like a primordial reflex, and my feet curled tightly like a little baby, cradling my butt and forming a womb-like sanctuary all around me. I've never felt so grounded, so secure, so safe. The visuals stopped and I was back to a place of infinite blackness, but it wasn't the slightest bit scary. Now the void became a force field of guardianship. It was heavenly in the most unexpected way. With my mind, I looked deeper into the black and a new vision began to take shape. I saw and felt dozens of vines growing upwards from the earth below, each covered with glowing dark purple and blood-red beads, rising up from all directions and wrapping around every inch of my body. Pachamama. I heard Pono singing from across the room. causing me to question which happened first, my vision or her words. Pachamama, she sang again several times as the vines kept reaching up and intertwining around me, cradling me in an impenetrable cocoon of protection. The vines turned from hundreds to thousands to infinite as the layers of the cocoon grew thicker and thicker. The purple and red beads exploded in my eyes like fireworks of warm light, and I felt a sensation of swaying back and forth like I was rocking in a hammock. As I swayed lightly in my mind, I felt a clear presence come into my sphere. Again, I don't know who or what it was. It may have even been my own spirit or soul or whatever, but it was undoubtedly there with me, and I was not one bit afraid of it. I couldn't really see it per se, but just like I had done to my hips earlier, it hushed me like I was now the young baby. I felt my nervous system downregulate even more, which I didn't think was possible. I moaned again and released once more, letting go and surrendering even deeper into the cocoon of vines that Mother Earth had so lovingly knit for me. I dropped deeper and deeper into the depths of my soul, which ironically sent me on an outward expansion, exploding far out into the cosmos, beyond the stars, beyond the galaxy, beyond the outermost limits of the universe, beyond the beyond. Every wall evaporated, all dividers disappeared, and I slowly dissolved into total oneness with the universe. I was absorbed by an ocean of blackness, disintegrating into infinite fractals of energy until there was no more me or anything else. There was no separation of any sort. There was only oneness. If I was dying, I didn't care. I gave myself willingly. Everyone, everything, every thought, and every feeling just vanished into pure nothingness. And I learned right then and there that there is actually no such thing as nothing. There is no emptiness. There is no void. I learned that you can't actually take everything away, because when you take everything away, you are left with the pure, unconditional, divine power that is, always has been, and always will be the force within all beings, in all places, at all times. Love. As I rested on the floor in the endless ocean of love, I felt my nervous system in the most calm and rested state it has ever been in. I could feel myself healing in real time. I don't know exactly what was healing or how it was happening, but it was very clear that I was. It was like my battery was recharging while being completely shut off, no energy being used at all, only gained. I floated in a sea of infinite bliss, unable to think of anything at all, and I didn't want to. I just wanted to stay here forever, listening to the sound of my own breath moving slowly in and out of my nose like a gentle summer breeze. For the first time ever, I understood the true meaning of at peace. This all changed when I heard a loud ding, followed by a long, low vibration that increased slowly in volume. From my morning rituals with Pono, I recognized it right away as a sound bowl. The sound grew louder, and I heard 2 more dings as other bowls joined in, filling the room with a high-frequency hum. The vibration took over as my head involuntarily lifted off the floor and began to rise, taking my whole torso with it. I felt completely relaxed, but as if I was possessed. My back straightened and lengthened, my rib cage expanded wide, my shoulders broadened, and my chest propelled forward, emanating a wave of power through my whole being. My hips felt completely grounded and stuck to the floor, while my torso stood long and tall, like a lioness on top of a mountain overlooking a valley. My heart energy burst through my chest with waves of green light beaming out of my sternum and out in the world with seemingly no end. The top of my head opened as magnificent rays of golden white light entered my body from the clouds above, connecting me to an infinite power source. My eyes rolled up and back inside my head, looking directly at the middle of my forehead, where I saw the most spectacular visions of a glowing emerald city glistening in the distance across a field of clouds. It was the most majestic image of any kind I could ever see or possibly imagine. A kingdom. Honor the beauty. A voice spoke softly from somewhere in the back of my mind. It was my voice, I'm sure, but it sounded like an angel whispering quietly in the ear of a sleeping child. Honor the beauty. It repeated this phrase over and over as the vibration grew stronger and louder. I took the message as a reminder to stay completely in the moment and allow myself to be in awe of the breathtaking visions and the indescribable feelings of peace and power. As the vibration rose, I felt mine rising with it like I was calibrating to a frequency of another dimension, so much greater than anything I'd ever felt. I didn't seem to be using any conscious effort to hold my body upright, but it stayed completely erect, expanding upward and outward effortlessly, as solid as a statue. I leaned forward slightly, my butt lifting off my feet and hovering just above my ankles. My chest was up, my eyes were up, and I was finally in the position I had seen Kaitiki in earlier. I felt exactly how she looked. Superhuman. Ding, ding, ding. I heard 3 consecutive strikes of a different instrument, something much higher pitched that instinctively jolted the muscles in my back and engaged my hips like an animal ready to pounce. Ding, ding, ding. My head whipped back and my arms raised out to the sides, floating effortlessly. The bowls kept playing as this other instrument, maybe tuning forks or bells, kept dinging alongside. While raised out to the side, my arms transformed into the most magnificent set of wings, and I saw myself as an eagle flying high above the clouds. I soared and swooped through the sky with the earth below stretching infinitely in all directions. The glory and honor is yours. The voice came back, again whispering softly over and over as I glided above the clouds with ease and grace. It was like a beautiful dream, except this felt more real than any dream I could feel, more real than anything I've ever felt. The glory and honor is yours. The bowls and bells slowly faded to silence, and my wings relaxed back to my side as I held still, listening to my own breath and heartbeat, calming me like a precious lullaby. I continued to sit in the throne position for a few more minutes, now very aware of my own aura radiating all around me, with the glowing green light still exploding from my chest and white and purple light out of the crown of my head. Eventually, I lowered my forehead back down to the floor and brought my arms back into my side, feeling the muscles in my upper back, neck, and hips glide across each other more easily than ever before. My body retracted and folded perfectly inside of itself, like a cat perched high on a tree branch. From here, I took a moment to reflect. I could never explain how any of this was happening, or how it was even possible, but I'm sure that it was. It defied all logic and all laws of reality, but I've never been so certain of myself, and so in tune with the feelings in my body, thoughts in my mind, and energy in my soul. I stayed in the perched cat position, tuning into every little physical, mental, and emotional feeling, when a new instrument made a noise from the center of the room. Boing, 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 it reverberated slowly. I'm certain I've never heard this instrument before in my normal life, but like everything today, the vibration itself was as familiar as could be, like I've spent lifetimes listening to it, or maybe even playing it myself. Curiosity got the best of me, and I peeked under my mask momentarily to see one of the men on the floor in the middle of the room flicking a small reed that was in his mouth. It was a jaw harp, the instrument that Pono and I had picked up from Machuca's office the other day. The response my body had to this sound was far different than the bowls and bells. Each boing sent a vibration down my spine and out through my limbs that activated some kind of involuntary reflex. He began playing the instrument with a more aggressive beat, and I simultaneously started shaking as the rhythm picked up. Bright white light started flashing in front of my eyes like a slow strobe light. My head twitched and my hands whipped with the noise like jolts of electric shocks. Thousands of microsynapses shot through my body at the speed of light, and I could only describe it as my nervous system glitching out like an overheating robot or something. After a few moments of what felt like system overload, the glitching and twitching started to come into rhythm with each other. The pulses smoothed out, and then it all synchronized with the music. The electric signals danced to the beat, and I suddenly felt every single inch of my body, from the tips of my fingers to the bottom of my feet, become connected. Like someone plugged me into a motherboard of ancient wisdom, I was upgrading to a new operating software. Everything was clicking. All signals were firing. All systems were communicating. I was coming fully online. Then the drumming came back, but this time it was different. The beat grabbed a hold of me and moved me in and out of patterns and positions I had never felt. My head bopped, my torso bounced in place, and I autonomically patted my thighs in perfect harmony with the drums. Within a few minutes, I was in a complete flow state, dancing with the energy of the medicine, of myself, and the entire room. Although I was still stationary, I felt myself twirling, jumping, stomping, and bouncing to the beat, not in response to the music, but in a state of complete oneness with the energy of the sound. No lapse in time between music and movement, no hesitation or doubt in my groove, no insecurity whatsoever. Like a fluid vessel, my body was fully harmonized with the ecstatic rhythm of the drums. Total singularity. The bass intensified, taking me deeper and deeper into what felt like the heartbeat of Mother Earth herself. A beat I now understood as a timeless and eternal pulse that humans have been dancing to since the beginning of time. As I flowed with this divine force, my mind turned off completely. I couldn't think about anything outside of the immediate here and now. With my eyes closed, or maybe open, I couldn't even tell anymore between the lucidity of the visions inside the eye mask. I saw 7 spheres of light energy stacked in alignment up the center of my being. At the very bottom base of my hips came a deep red glow, with the one above it in a beautiful orange, and above that a golden yellow. At my heart center was the emerald green explosion radiating outward, with a similar blue energy directly on top near my throat. In the center of my forehead was an indigo glow, and right above my head a violet crown of mystical light. I didn't have a real-world understanding of these energy centers, but I knew they were my chakras, and I knew they were very real. I also knew for certain that this was the first time I'd ever activated them all in alignment, and that this was a huge part of the reason I was experiencing this radical state of elevated consciousness. More instruments joined in, creating a mystical symphony of power that spun around the room like a magical wind, with every note activating a different sphere of light energy, causing it to burst with color in front of my eyes. All my senses bled together and converged into one. The musical notes and the corresponding colors pulsated in unison, and I could see the music and even hear the scents that were burning all around the room. The top of my head opened wider, and what I can only describe as a higher intelligence came pouring in abundantly. There were long sequences of numerical codes, like digits of pi or something similar, along with geometric patterns and Fibonacci spirals swirling around my head and cascading into my mind like a raging waterfall. While it was all deeply embedded with infinite love and light, I was now walking the fine line of total overload. Suddenly, Pono screeched loudly and then began chanting in some sort of strange tongues, significantly intensifying what I thought couldn't possibly get any more intense. The room shook as if it were to explode at any moment, and everyone moaned and groaned restlessly, tiptoeing the razor's edge of light and dark. Pono chanted louder, howling and whistling on beat with the music, opening a massive energetic window in the top of the maloka. She danced violently in the middle of the room as she channeled the energy into the room and waved it all around us, moving the sacred force into every inch of the space and into each one of us. I was terrified, but held an unprecedented courage. To an outsider, what I was witnessing could have been mistaken for witchcraft, had I not been able to recognize the unconditional divine love as the core energy of the force. There was no mistaking that Pono, despite the paranormal sounds and gestures, was acting in the highest alignment and channeling the purest light. Like a tornado of energy, the intelligence flowed in a circular vortex and engulfed me from every angle. I was opening up and receiving the wisdom of the universe. The colors, the sounds, the numbers, the smells, the music, all became one thing. My breath, my heartbeat, the contraction and expansion of my muscles, the light in front of my eyes, even the pulse of my organs. It all harmonized. It all became one infinite flow of information channeling into my body and downloading deeply into the fibers of my being. It was magic. It was real. It was code. The code poured in forcefully, saturating every cell and filling every millimeter of space inside my body. As it did, things became insanely intense. My hands opened and extended violently with energetic claws bursting out of my fingertips. My spine twisted and turned side to side, and my neck spun and cracked like a chiropractic adjustment. The intelligence flooded through my body, pulling up and pushing out everything that could not withstand its power. I felt negative feelings inside bubbling up. Doubt, worry, angst, and I could feel them in their most extreme forms move to my stomach and start making their way up my throat. A rush of nausea and panic came with it, and I reached for a nearby bucket. As I sat over the bucket, I received a very clear message that these feelings of worry and doubt are all just slightly different variations of fear, and like all fear, they do not serve me. I was told that these feelings are not required on this journey, and are holding me back in ways I could never understand, and across every aspect of my life. Okay, I pleaded into the bucket, confirming that the message had been received and begging for it to stop. I will let go of what does not serve me. I felt some liquid come up into my mouth, and I instantly spit it into the bucket violently. It tasted like toxic venom and was unmistakably the fearful emotions that were being moved around inside. Next, a tsunami of more negative emotions rushed in. Anger, shame, guilt, resentment, jealousy. All the things I would have sworn weren't an issue for me. Yet the medicine was showing me clear as day that they are hindering my life in countless ways. I felt these energies circulating out of my torso, down my limbs, and back into my stomach, my body writhing and twisting as the nausea amplified to an unbearable level. I burped long and loud, echoing a bellow of darkness inside the bucket. Suddenly, I noticed the drums again. I don't know if they'd ever stopped, but now they were deafening, and the vibrations felt like suffocating waves of heat pressure. I cried a painful groan into the bucket, followed by a violent dry heave. I was gauging and convulsing, on the verge of explosion. I spit more of the toxic venom into the bucket. The taste was indescribably horrific. I ripped my blindfold off and was surprised to see Pono sitting right next to me. "Don't fight it. Allow it to move," she advised. "Let it go." I gauged violently as my head jolted deeper into the bucket. "Release," she whispered. She traced her fingers up from the bottom of my spine and over my head. When she reached the top of my head, she snapped her fingers loudly, as if she were controlling the whole thing, and I instantaneously vomited into the bucket. She repeated the tracing of my spine and snapping of her fingers multiple times, and each time I violently purged a low-vibrational dark brown and black toxic sludge. I could hardly breathe as my body retched. Snot dripped out of my nose and tears poured down my face. The energy was so intense, my body trembled. The drumming stopped, and Pono began to sing. Again, it seemed like she was channeling some sort of primordial language. I did not know the language, yet I somehow understood the meaning. Cleanse, cleanse, cleanse your spirit. Allow yourself to be. Cleanse, cleanse, cleanse your spirit. You are safe with me. Cleanse, cleanse, cleanse your spirit. Release what is not love. Cleanse, cleanse, cleanse your spirit. Accept the healing from above. Then she quickly reached over to the altar and came back with a bowl of burning coal. She used a feather to fan me with the smoke, humming softly and making swooshing sounds of air around my head and ears, blowing away the lingering cloud of dark energy. I began to catch my breath and calm down. I was speechless. Everything that had just happened was so painful and horrific, yet in some strange way, miraculously beautiful. As badly as I wanted it to stop, I knew it was necessary for my growth and where I was going next. I was upgrading. I was healing. In that moment, I sat and processed what had just happened, and I completely rewired a new relationship with the word healing, a word that will never look or feel the same to me again. It was all necessary to get me here. The medicine, the music, the visuals, the scents, the prayers, the songs, they all played a key role in the process. It's all medicine. Then, as if she was reading my mind, because I think she was, Pono whispered in my ear, "Todo es medicina." I speak almost no Spanish, but I knew right away this meant all is medicine. I lifted my head to look at her. I had hair stuck to the sweat that was beating off my forehead, snot running down my nose, tears rolling down my cheeks, and vomit dripping off my chin. She handed me some tissues, but I barely had the energy to use them. I took a few half-hearted wipes to clean the worst of it, turned to her, and repeated back with the little energy I could muster. Todo es medicina. Pono laughed the most loving laugh as she pulled me in close and cradled me in her lap. Todo es medicina, she shouted across the room. Todo es medicina, the other facilitators sang in response. I lay in Pono's arms and looked around the room. It looked like a World War II infirmary with bodies draped in all directions while the handful of facilitators did their best to comfort and serve everyone at once. I realized in that moment that my life was never going to be the same again. I would never forget what just happened or what I witnessed. It would be impossible to do so. As I lay curled up in Pono's arms, with her sitting cross-legged and patting my back lightly as she hummed softly, I had another realization. I was being held. Pono held me closely as I slowly landed, so to speak. I relaxed in the comfort of her arms, exhausted yet very alive. I just lay as she patted my back and stroked my hair softly, humming a beautiful melody. I tried to process everything that I had just experienced, but even though the intensity had dropped, it was far from over. I couldn't really reflect on the visions and sensations without going right back into them, so I kept my eyes open and allowed myself to just be present in Pono's loving arms for a few minutes. After a while, Pono checked in with me. "How are you feeling?" "I couldn't even begin to tell you," I answered with a sarcastic chuckle and head shake. "But good, really good. You did good work, Sandra. You were brave and strong," she complimented with a momentary squeeze of my shoulders. "I'm proud of you." I felt a rush of pride rise and circulate through my whole body, again taking me back to the vision of the lioness on the mountaintop. "Thank you," I answered, "and thank you for helping me." "Thank you for allowing me," she answered. "Thank you for your trust." Wrapped in her lap, our breathing began to synchronize, and we swayed ever so lightly to her humming. The connection I felt to Pono in that moment was incredibly strong. The role of mentor and student, or leader and learner, was evident and obvious without any need to question or doubt the hierarchy. I honored her leadership and her offerings, and she respected me for my work despite my beginner blunders. Without needing to speak a single word, I now knew I could trust her to lead me through any challenge, no matter how hard, and she knew she could trust me to follow and act with courage. A bond was forming and solidifying in real time, something unbreakable, something I now feel worthy of calling sacred. I suddenly understood that this work was about much more than personal healing. It was like I was being initiated into a tribe and being called to something higher. Before today, I could not even attempt to step into this field of power, but now I was ready. I could see how the events of today and this entire week have already radically redirected the trajectory of my life. To where? I don't know. For what? I have no idea. But it was extremely clear that there is a reason I felt and saw what I did today. A reason far beyond just my individual life circumstances. Finally, I stood up. I was a little dizzy at first, but in a moment felt solid and secure on my feet, like I was in a different body altogether. I finished cleaning my face, drank some water, and eventually made my way outside to the bathroom, pausing along the way to breathe in the magic of the surrounding nature. I received the warmth of the sun, the breeze of the wind, and the songs of the birds as tokens of respect to my work inside. It sounds ridiculous, but they knew. On my way back from the bathroom, I saw Charlie heading towards them. He was a man I had only interacted with briefly up until this point in the trip, but noticed him in the Maloka earlier battling like a warrior. I could see it wasn't easy for him, but he withstood the test, and it was obvious that he was walking taller. Without even a word exchanged, we paused and embraced each other with a long heart-to-heart hug. His energy was like a rock, and although we were still practically strangers, it felt like I was holding a long-lost brother. As we pulled back from the hug, he kept his hands on my shoulders, looked me in the eyes, and said, "I love you," to which I boldly replied without a flinch at all, "I love you too," and we each walked our separate ways. I found my way back to my mat, curled up in the fetal position, and got comfortable. I was still very much in the spirit of the medicine. The intensity had dropped, but the magic was still moving through me. Kaitiki sat next to me for a moment to check in on me. I didn't need to say much. I just smiled wide, pulled her in for a hug, and whispered, "Thank you," in her ear. "Thank you for your trust," she responded, then informed me that she was going to play the handpan for a bit. As the first notes rang, I was immediately pulled back deeply into that dreamlike dimension of beauty and wonder, and this time I entered with a smile as I snuggled up warmly on my mat. I knew right away that the rest of the ceremony was going to be a little different. Kaitiki played the metallic drum with such ease and grace, the only word that could come close to justice was heavenly. Each note rang through my ears and activated a light show in front of my eyes as I drifted back inward, this time without any struggle. I felt calm and in control, in a deep state of flow, feeling like I could finally navigate the power of the medicine to unlock vital answers in my life. I began to step curiously into the depths of my own mind. With the state of clarity I was in, I could see that I already possessed all of the answers I could ever need, but the key was being able to work backward to identify the right questions. With this realization, the angelic whisper reemerged with a simple phrase that echoed from the depths of my soul. "Ask, and you shall receive." At this point, I was familiar with this voice and the inner dialogue, and although it seemed wildly impossible on paper, it came with this distinct sense of normalcy. The voice, the visions, the energy in the room, the force of love that had overtaken me earlier and still lingered very much, the feelings that circulated through my body, it was all so familiar. I never experienced it all in this specific setting, but I was clearly being shown that all of this has been in me and around me my entire time on Earth. I've just been disconnected from it. How could I be so out of touch? I thought to myself, bewildered by the notion of not always being able to feel what I was feeling right now. I wasn't literally asking myself the question. I was just thinking. But nevertheless, the voice inside responded immediately. Ask, and you shall receive. In an instant, I was shown, like a movie on a screen, a montage of images and visuals that answered the question very precisely. First, a baby in its mother's womb. The baby was faceless, as if it represented all babies everywhere. In the womb, it had everything that I now know to exist in this universe. The light, the intelligence, and most importantly, the infinite unconditional love. I saw an image of the unborn infant, floating peacefully in a protective layer of fluid, bluish and purple light glowing all around with golden light sources shining like a galaxy of stars, and the endless sound of Om humming in the background. This feeling reconnected me to the feelings of infinite oneness I had felt earlier, understanding clearly that this was the feeling of the womb environment. I was feeling what the baby felt. Next, the scene flashed forward to the baby emerging from the birth canal in a loud, cold room full of bright white lights and strangers. The safety of the loving womb environment faded, and a sensation of pure terror overtook me, causing me to jerk my body violently. Then I saw the baby being removed from the mother's arms and taken into a separate room. The fear sensation became stronger with every step the doctor took away from the mother. I violently turned over to my other side, trying to shake the horrific fear. Separation from source, the voice whispered. In a flash, the next scene showed up. The baby was about a year or two old, being injected in the arm with a needle. Nobody in the vision was speaking, yet the baby was drowning in dark voices, shouting, "You are not safe, you are not strong, and you are not capable," as it subconsciously interpreted the situation and embedded the codes of weakness. Separation from source, the voice whispered again as I trembled with fright. Boom. Next scene flashed. The child was now school age, being shown in a family that sleeps in separate beds, all in separate rooms, getting ready to go live their separate lives, running around in their own individual bubbles of emotion, each confused and afraid in their own unique ways, their souls flailing for help, trying to stay above the everyday stressors of this lifestyle. The message was clear. The physical distance between them was only a few feet, but the spiritual distance was miles. They had little awareness of the pain they each held inside, and my heart broke in agony over the normalcy of it. Separation from source. Then in school, I could feel the young child who yearned so deeply to be creative, aching to express curiosity and discover who it really is, but not given the space, time, tools, or environment to do so. It was in that second I had a major download. I realized that our creative energy is purely the excess overflow of the infinite love that created us and creates all things. Our creation is how we express our gifts and give back to the Creator. It was all so clear, but simultaneously so devastating, as I saw the child being drained of the connection to this vital energy source, and instead being ruthlessly compared to its peers based on arbitrary standards of success, and pitted against the other children both directly and indirectly in endless mandatory competitive endeavors that ultimately shape their image of themselves. Separation from source echoed again as tears began to flow down my face. I could feel it all so strongly. Next, the child was a teenager, standing in front of a mirror, angry and frustrated at its daily disappointing performance in the perpetual beauty contest it never signed up for, but takes up more emotional energy than anything else in life. Like every morning, it was layering itself in brand-name clothes and expensive products in a desperate attempt to look like something more than its true self. Separation from source. I moaned as the tears continued to pour. I could feel the pain not of this one child, but of the millions and millions of children fighting this same battle every morning. I tossed and turned on the floor, starting to shake in discomfort, when the next image came into view. The child, still faceless but now a little older, scrolling through the bottomless pit of social media. The visual fast-forwarded like a time-lapse as the child scrolled for hours every day for hundreds and hundreds, maybe thousands of days. As time passed, the shoulders began rounding. It slumped deeper and deeper into the chair. Dark circles formed under the eyes, and every muscle in the body ached and atrophied. A dark cloud of depression formed around the child and thickened by the second. In the background, parents walked by countless times, but not a word was spoken until the very end when the mom came and ripped it out of the child's hand, causing a heated verbal exchange of hate. Separation from source. I wept. I couldn't handle the sadness. I writhed on the floor trying to make the images stop. The tragedy was not in the severity of the situations, but the normalcy. I felt the pain so strongly, not just of the faceless child, but of the millions of others who experience this disconnection daily. Now that I felt the source, all I could see was the separation. Why are we so disconnected? I shouted in my mind, begging for an answer. Ask, and you shall receive. Now the images shifted away from one individual child and turned to the masses. Before I even saw anything specific, I felt my vibration start to lower, symbolically connecting me to the frequency of the norm. I felt a layer of angst at the base of it all, now seeing that this anxiety was not only present in all of us, it was simply a spiritual disconnection. It was worry, it was fear, it was a lack of faith that we are safe and protected and provided for, a lack of belief that we are all loved unconditionally. But why? Why can't we feel it? Why is our vibration so low? Why are we so disconnected from this? The next thing I saw was the news stations blaring out of the TV in every home, waiting room, radio station, coffee shop, and the like. I didn't see anything specific. I was just shown what was important, the frequency of the vibration emanating from it. Low, dark, dense waves of fear and scarcity radiated out and into everyone watching and was absorbed into their cells like sponges. My hands shook with anxiety. Following that, I saw a line of cars wrapped around a Dunkin' Donuts drive-thru. Thousands of cars moving through at light speed, each one stopping momentarily to fill their cups and stomachs, simultaneously lowering their vibration with every bite. I saw visions of stomachs fattening as the emptiness only grew. My stomach bubbled with gas pains. Then I saw the Netflix home screen. Dozens of images designed by people who are paid ridiculous amounts of money to steal your attention. I saw sickening murder documentaries, absurdly violent movies, and raunchy sex shows taking up nearly every option, leaving viewers no choice but to consume the heart-infecting viral content, which they so gladly did. I cringed and curled in discomfort. Next, I saw American holidays. I could see the grip they had on us all, keeping us locked tight to the cadence of this yearly schedule, leaving us no choice but to participate in the low vibrational consumption of toxic substances and material goods year after year. In this same vision, I was shown the slow devastation of all the traditions of our ancestors, as they've each progressively lost all spiritual meaning and been replaced with slightly different varieties of parties centered around beer and hot dogs. I saw the millions of commercials and ads running every single second of the day across anything and everything we lay our eyes on, each one with the same underlying message: you are not enough. I saw each one of us wasting our hard-earned money on the endless stream of overpriced products promising to fix us where we are apparently so broken and lacking. I burst out in tears. It was too real. It was all real. It was everywhere, and it owned us. The veil had been lifted, and I could suddenly see how it all worked. An empire of darkness dragging us down and keeping us low and away from the light above. This was the empirical code manifested in its material form. Why? Why? We don't have to hurt like this. We don't have to suffer like this. Pono came over to comfort me again, startling me for a moment as I was so deep in thought I forgot anyone else was even here. "Are you okay?" she asked. I sniffled and wiped my tears. "No." "What can I help you with?" "Nothing," I answered bitterly. "It's just so sad. The pain, it's everywhere. It's in everyone. It's so strong." "I know," she answered sadly with a drop of her head. "I know." "What can I do? I want to just fix it. I want to help. I want to show them. I want to save them. But how?" I cried. "That's not a question for me, dear. That's a question for you. That's an answer you'll find inside," she replied as she patted my head. "And there's only room inside for one." I didn't like her answer, but she was right. I closed my eyes again and returned to the dream state, trying to tune back into the high vibrational frequency that has guided me so clearly today. I felt my perspective elevating again, and a channel of energy flooded in through the top of my head. There has to be a way to help. How do I fix this? "Don't fix. Just be," the voice responded. "Don't fix? Okay, so how do I be?" Again, I wasn't directing this question towards anyone, but like before, the answers appeared. First, with the breakthrough realization about my tendency to always want to save the world. I saw a lucid depiction of a human heart floating in space, beating slowly and softly as if it was struggling. With each beat, the heart bled, leaking blood out of all sides and dripping off into the blackness. I knew right away that the medicine was showing me that this was my heart. The bleeding heart that has always felt the pain of others. The bleeding heart that always wants to fix the world's problems. It was the bleeding heart that wanted to solve world hunger and bring world peace and end homelessness and give everyone free health care and save the whales and on and on and on. While it was perfectly clear that this heart was mine, I was unsure of what the message was supposed to be. I always thought of this quality as a good thing. I cared about others and I cared about the planet. Why did this image seem negative, like my heart was hurting or struggling to survive? "It bleeds with love, but it acts from fear." My mind stopped, like someone hit the pause button. "It bleeds with love, but it acts from fear," repeated again. I wasn't totally clear on the message, at least until the visuals came in. In perfect synchronicity, I was able to both see and feel what I needed in order to understand. I saw all the time I had spent raising money for these large charities and organizations without ever really digging deep into their real mission because, well, I was scared to know the truth. I saw myself at political rallies and fundraisers, cheering and calling on others to come forward and support, yet again not willing to ask the hard questions about the motives and agendas. Again, because deep inside I was afraid of what I might find. I could see myself wanting to save the planet and change the world and make global impact, yet I was afraid to really look at my own life closely. I patted myself on the back for all the causes I was willing to fight for and time and money I was willing to give, but I was terrified to think about how my personal choices were impacting the people in my immediate circle and the ripple effect of that out into the world. As I processed this, I realized that I would have never made this realization without the help of the medicine, and I was overtaken with gratitude for this. But then I came back to my original question: how do I fix this? But of course, before I could even finish the thought completely, I received the same answer. Don't fix. Just be. Right. Don't fix. Just be. But what does that mean? How do I be different enough to make real change in the world? How does my being different change all of the pain and suffering in the world? And as the instantaneous clarity continued, I understood right away my role, no matter what I may think, is not to end all of the pain and suffering in the world. All I can do is look at myself in the mirror, fill my heart with love, and go live my life just like Pono had told me, from the inside out. From the inside out. From the inside out. From the inside out. The words surrounded me like a warm bath of love as I promised myself to only commit to this one simple thing and trust that this would have more impact on the world than anything else I could do. As I bathed in the warm love, the image of my heart reappeared, but this time the beat was strong and the bleeding had stopped, allowing it to be full and saturated and glowing with love. A majestic depiction of strength and beauty. I watched the heart beat as I lay in a state of pure bliss, overwhelmed with gratitude for the insight I received so far today. As I watched the heart, I began to wonder how and where I could bring this love to the world in the most meaningful way. With this thought, the heart began to fade, and a new image slowly came into view. 3 faces emerged, and I could not recognize them at first. But very soon I could see so clearly that it was my mom, my dad, and my sister. Admittedly, the feelings that arose as the faces of my family members came into view were very mixed. Although my heart overflowed with love for each of them, I knew there was some work ahead of me. If I'm being honest, I wanted to look away. I wanted to stay cuddled up, just basking in the bliss, not try to untangle the web of my family relationships. But I knew this was the work that needed to be done. The message could not be more clear. So I took a deep breath and let out a long sigh. Okay, here we go. I closed my eyes and allowed myself to dissolve back inward, a step that now seemed simple and easy at this point in the ceremony. The first image that came to view was a memory of when I was a very young girl, maybe 3 or 4 years old. I was walking down the hallway in our house. I had just left my bedroom and was headed toward my sister's room. It was wildly vivid. From my toddler vantage point, the hallway seemed 20 feet high. I could feel our thick carpet under my feet and immediately recognized our old wallpaper, even though I hadn't seen or felt either one in about 25 years. I opened the door to her room and was rapidly filled with the same emotions, reminding me of exactly how I experienced this moment every time I entered her room at that age. Her bright pink walls, her big kid bed, her stuffed animals hanging in a large net in the corner of the room. She had a long mirror with pretty stickers all around it, and even had her own desk for homework. From the minor decorations, to the clothes hanging on the closet doorknob, even down to the distinct smell of her room, I relived it as clear as day and felt every emotion that came with it. She was my hero, my idol, my role model. She was so good at everything, always knew so much and made everything seem cool. I mimicked her every move. I wanted to be able to do all of the things she did. I worshipped her. As I recollected these memories, I was shocked both by how vividly I could remember them and also by how easily I've forgotten these details. It simultaneously felt like lifetimes ago and just yesterday. I paused to wonder, how did I ever lose this feeling? I still love her very much, and I still admire her in many ways, but over the years our relationship has become very complicated. We are extremely close and would do anything for each other, but it's also very competitive and comparative, often passive-aggressive, and even catty at times. As I pondered this question, I was suddenly transformed, not literally, but energetically, I guess, into her. Instead of feeling my emotions at that time of my life, I now felt hers. To my surprise, the feelings were not totally mutual. Well, some were. She clearly loved me just as much, with a distinct older sister energy that was protective and nurturing. She adored me and cherished me like any older sibling would, but there was also a deeper, lingering sense of resentment. I felt an underlying jealousy and a feeling of being threatened. In a subconscious way, she felt like she was now competing for attention from my parents. She was worried she would be outshined, dethroned. I felt these feelings not just as young children, but throughout our adolescent years and even now in adulthood. They were below her level of perception, or maybe above. But either way, she wasn't even really fully aware of the feelings and how they were affecting her actions toward me. I was baffled by this. Why would she feel this way? I idolized her in every way. She was the one who could do it all, the golden girl. Why would she feel threatened by me? As it's been happening all day, the answers appeared as quickly as I could ask the question, and I was granted a glimpse into a side of her life I had never known. I could see, feel, and relive moments in her life that were totally unbeknownst to me. I felt her tossing and turning in bed the night before a big test, anxious as can be that she wouldn't get a perfect score. I saw her trying on 5 different outfits in the morning, every morning before school, ripping them off and throwing them to the floor in disgust until she found one that was acceptable. I saw her trying to fit in with the other girls in the cafeteria, doing, saying, and wearing anything necessary to be accepted. I felt her never-ending desire for our parents' approval, an emotion I was very familiar with. I experienced her emotions at my high school graduation, where I was named valedictorian just like her. And although she was proud and happy, there was an inner feeling of being outshined. A feeling that I then saw continued to carry on, all the way to this day, as she feels that I've outdone her by becoming a standout scientist, while she's settled for being an OBGYN, despite being the head of the entire university hospital and a professor. This all came as a total shock. How could she feel this way? How could we be seeing and experiencing the same situation so differently? Again, the answers appeared as images and feelings. This time, I felt insecurity. I felt a lack of confidence. I felt jealousy. And most of all, despite a lifetime of countless accomplishments and a seemingly perfect life, I felt lack. I was deeply saddened by this. I imagined myself pulling her in for a big, long hug, showing her how much I love her, helping her feel how much she means to me, and filling her heart with my admiration and respect. I held her tight, and I cried again. "Tell her," the message came in. "She needs to know." My first instinct was to resist, still wanting to believe that it was unnecessary, that she already knew how I felt, that I didn't need to tell her. But now I know that isn't true. I swore to myself right then and there that I would share this with her as soon as I saw her next. I would pull her in tight for a long overdue hug that really counted and make sure she knows how I feel. As I made that commitment to myself, her face faded away. It was as if I now had my assignment and that chapter was closed. And as soon as it was gone, the face of my father emerged, signifying that he was next up on the list. Again, I squirmed. I loved my dad dearly, and we've always had a good relationship. He supported me, encouraged me, and believed in me through every stage of my life. He's a scientist also, and so is his father, and even though I never really knew his father, they were both the main inspirations in my career path. Being of German descent, he displayed many of the stereotypical characteristics. He was rigid and strict, but never mean. And although he undoubtedly loved and supported us, he sorely lacked the warm and fuzzy side that us girls needed. He was our coach and mentor, always pushing us to be our best and expected nothing less. And many times he was consumed by his work and felt very distant. But it was always understood that he was doing his best to balance the demands of his work and his fatherly duties. I wouldn't have thought that there was anything between us that needed to be addressed. But at this point, I'm aware that there must be something. I wasn't even sure where to start. But luckily, I didn't even have to figure it out because the medicine showed me exactly that answer. I jumped to an image of him I've seen 100 times in my life. It was the view from the downstairs hallway in our house, looking through the doorway and into his study, where he sat at his desk working intently. I recognized the face so well. A distinct look of focus and concentration. A look everyone in the house knew meant, do not disturb. I admired him from afar like I'd always done, wondering what sort of amazing breakthroughs he must be finding or what kind of revolutionary ideas he was coming up with. It steered my attention off of him and brought it to the things all around him in the study. There were shelves of leather-bound books floor to ceiling on 2.5 walls, all of which he had read, as he liked to brag about frequently. In the background was a large globe marked with the places he had traveled for work, another favorite topic of discussion, as he was clearly proud of the places he had been. Along the wall, of course, were his diplomas, his Bachelor of Science degree, his Master's degree, and right front and center, his PhD. There were plaques on the mantel with various recognitions he had received during his career, and underneath those, a long row of framed letters. I, of course, recognized these as the acceptance letters of all the Ivy League schools he had been accepted to, even all the ones he didn't attend. But this time, as I looked at them, I felt something shift inside. As I stared at the letters, I noticed the image of my father began to transform from the proud and noble scientist into more of a meek and timid shadow of himself. His confident energy faded, and he slowly shrank from a grown man down to a young boy. I had only ever seen a few pictures of my father when he was young, but this was undoubtedly him, I was certain as can be. As he shrank into the young boy, he was now suddenly standing next to the desk, and in his seat he was replaced by his father, my grandfather. The scene shifted slightly, showing me that I was now looking into a memory of my father as a young boy, visiting his dad in his almost identical style study. My grandfather had passed away when I was only an infant, so I had never really known him. All I know is that he had a reputation of being a stereotypical German scientist. All work, no play, and a very cold demeanor. He gave my father and the rest of the family a great life, so no one ever spoke poorly of him. But in this moment, I was witnessing something between him and my father that I was not aware of. I couldn't tell exactly what was happening in the study, but my dad was about 6 or 7 years old, standing next to his desk, trying to show him something. It was a piece of paper, probably a report card or a test. My dad looked happy and proud of the paper he was holding, excited to share it. But my grandfather was not paying attention. He was engulfed in his work, refusing to turn his attention away from it. My dad reached the paper higher and leaned it over his desk until my grandfather finally leaned over, gave it a momentary glance, grunted, and waved him out of the office. My dad turned, put his head down and left the room, walking right past me in clear disappointment. A second later, I flashed back to the original scene, looking from the hallway into the study in my home. Now everything was back to the original, except my father was still that young boy sitting at his desk, softly crying in sadness. This was not just a surface-level sadness. This was a deep core wound. I felt his sadness consume me. I began to weep as I watched. I didn't need an explanation. I felt it. I felt the need for validation and the approval from his father, who he admired so much. I felt the desire to be seen and acknowledged for his effort and his dedication. I felt the massive letdown of devoting one's entire life to earn the respect of the person they admire most, only to be disappointed over and over and over again. All he ever wanted was to make his dad proud. I began to cry harder, and so did he. Curling his legs up toward his chest, he hugged his knees as the tears burst out uncontrollably. The showcase of awards and accomplishments that surrounded him in the room all turned to metal armor, like a medieval soldier would wear, then fell to the floor and evaporated, showing me that things he was so proud of were merely a suit of armor, protecting the little boy by preventing the world from seeing his sadness inside. I ran over and embraced him in a hug, and we cried together. My heart swelled as I sent that little boy all the love and strength I could possibly muster. I held him in my arms, patted his back, and without physically speaking, told him over and over, "I'm so proud of you, Dad. I'm so proud. I love you." "Tell him," the message came in again. "He needs to know." This time I didn't resist. I swore to myself in that moment that as soon as I returned home, I would share these feelings with him. And just like my sister, his image faded away, and in came the biggest challenge of all: my mother. As the presence of my mom came to me, I was happily surprised by the feelings that came with it. Rather than the expected negative emotions of our recent bickering, I was taken to an entirely different place. Our disagreements and differences temporarily faded away, and I was instead wrapped in the arms of a distinct sense of motherly love. I curled up tighter on my mat, like I was a young baby being held by her again, and basked in the flood of warmth and safety. In that moment, I was reminded of the sacred and unmatchable power of the mother. All mothers, not just mine. I was able to notice the difference between motherly love and romantic love, or sibling love, or any other types of love. I could feel that the love of a mother supersedes all other human versions of love. The force was indescribable and unexplainable, and there was no misunderstanding that what I was feeling was truly the power of a mother's love for her children. I took a few moments to just be in that space, feeling her energy all around me. I could smell her perfumes, I could identify her arms, and I could hear her voice singing lightly in the distance, like she would when I was an infant. It was beautiful in every way, helping me realize that my recent feelings toward my mother were just that, recent, and not at all how I truly felt deep inside. I loved her so much. So very much, and I let this love surge through me and out of my heart toward her, sending her all that I could give. It was a magical moment, and I cherished it greatly, with both a slight hint of shame that I had ever lost touch with this feeling in the first place, and instant forgiveness for myself, sourced from this profound force. For a moment, I figured this must be all I was supposed to do today. Just reconnect with the infinite love of the mother and remember how deep our relationship runs. Maybe today is not the day to solve the constant rift between us. However, as those words went through my head, I saw the rift between us take shape right in front of my eyes. It came in the form of a wall of energy between us, keeping us from truly connecting. The blockage was made mostly of unspoken tension, although the spoken words of conflict were not completely absent. The wall was not very thick, quite thin in fact, yet the message was clear. Even this thin layer of tension was still separation, and when it comes to true connection, what might only be a few inches of separation may as well be a few miles. Even though we didn't hate each other and have massive blowouts all the time, this was still more than enough to keep us at odds with one another and disconnect us from that love that should be so present. This message, like most of the messages I received today, was slightly paradoxical in nature. As I received the message, I saw it as something incredibly obvious, like I had already known this all along. Yet at the same time, I had the awareness to know that I would have never really seen it like this without the work I'm doing today. It was the confirmation I needed that our conscious mind just cannot possibly recognize the true feelings of the subconscious without a little help. See, my relationship with my mother is relatively normal. She lives about half an hour away, and I usually see her every week or two minimum, sometimes more frequently. We are mostly amicable, very civil, and always take the time to check in on each other and update each other on our lives. I love her, of course, and she gave us everything as children. We had a great life, and it was very much due to her and how committed she was to us. As I processed these feelings, I came to realize that despite how much I love her, it's liking her that I find to be the challenge. She always has a way of making remarks or comments that feel like subtle attacks. She can be quite judgmental, strongly opinionated, and it's pretty much a guarantee that she will share input beyond what is asked. She's always demanded a lot of us and held us to the highest standards of success. Although no matter what we did, it was never quite enough. Her expectations were seemingly in every case just out of reach. I was momentarily saddened thinking about this and how often our check-in phone calls and life updates ended in bickering. Her passive-aggressive remarks triggered me so easily, and her condescending tone drove me mad. I felt anger creeping in just thinking about it, causing me to flash back to our last conversation, which, to no surprise, ended with a fight. This time, I witnessed it from a third-party perspective, like a fly on the wall. "You need to find yourself a good man," she said to me. "Then you won't be so uneasy about going to family events alone anymore." "Mom, that's not why I don't want to go to the party." "Well, why else wouldn't you want to go?" "I don't want to go because it's boring and I barely know these people. We see each other like twice a year and all we do is small talk about each other's lives that we know nothing about." "Exactly," she replied. "And if you had a good man in your life, you wouldn't feel so bad talking about it." "First of all, I have plenty of things in my life that are far more interesting and important than a boyfriend, okay? And secondly, I've told you 100 times I am way too invested in my work research to be dating right now." "Oh, come on, Sandra," she snapped back. "Don't you see how ridiculous you are being? Working too hard to have a relationship? You're in your 30s now. When exactly do you plan on getting started with the process?" I didn't answer. I wanted to make it very clear that I wasn't getting into this again. "Me and your father were already married by your age, you know? And he was able to provide for us so we could start a family. That's what a good man does." "Okay, Mom, like you'd actually approve of anyone I dated anyway," I replied with an attitude. "When I was dating Jeff, all you did was tell me I could do better and just kept checking to make sure we weren't going to get married." "Oh, well, forgive me if I don't want to see my daughter marry a construction worker." "He wasn't a construction worker. He was a contractor and owned his own business, okay? But even if he was, who cares? He was a good guy and treated me well." "Treated you well? He dumped you?" "Mom, we've been through this 100 times. It was mutual. We were going in two different directions." "Well, all I'm saying is that it's time to get back in the game if you ever want to have a family," she responded. "You haven't been using the Peloton I got you for Christmas, have you? When I saw you at dinner last week, you looked just the same as you did 6 months ago." "Enough," I shouted. "I'm done, okay? This conversation is over. I'm not going to the party, end of story, and don't expect to see me anytime soon after." "What is that supposed to mean?" "It means I need some space, okay?" I answered. "From you." The vision disappeared, but as I processed it now, it felt much different than the first time around. I could see it from a whole new perspective. For one, I saw myself as equally responsible for our fights. I normally felt like a victim, like she was always pushing my buttons and making me angry. But that isn't actually the case. I was equally as responsible for the arguments. As I saw the interaction from this view, I didn't just hear the words, I felt the energy from deep within. I noticed how easily I became angry. Kaitiki was right. She didn't make me angry. I chose to be angry from the moment I knew the conversation was steering toward the uncomfortable. I could see my expectation that every conversation would end in conflict was a big reason why it always did. It was like a self-fulfilling prophecy. I also dismissed her comments so quickly that I wasn't able to see that there were some truths buried underneath. She was right. I do want to date and meet men, and I shouldn't be letting work interfere with something as important as finding the right partner. I also haven't been riding the Peloton she gave me, even though I swore I was going to be on it every day. I've been using my work and my subpar physical appearance as reasons not to put myself out there. And for some strange reason, I wasn't trying to overcome these obstacles. I was just clinging to them as excuses to why it's not the right time. I didn't understand why I was lying to myself, but I definitely was. Of course, when I actually thought about it, the medicine showed me the answer so clearly. I was afraid of being hurt again. Afraid, as usual. The story was just a protection mechanism to keep me from experiencing another heartbreak. Jeff was a good guy, and for a while I thought he was the one. But in reality, the breakup wasn't actually as mutual as I've led both her and myself to believe. In the aftermath, I reasoned that it was best for us both, spinning the facts in my favor to make it seem like I wanted it too. But inside it hurt me to the core, and I can now see how afraid I am of being hurt like that again. My mom, although so rude and ineloquent in her delivery, knows this to be true, and in her own unique and irritating way is trying to help me. She's my mother, and she is eternally connected to me. She feels the pain even when I don't let myself feel it. She knows I'm hurting inside and wants so badly for it to end. This realization took me back to the first wave of love that entered when I saw her face appear. The unbreakable connection between mother and child. The bond so deep it transcends the normal limits of the physical realm and holds open an endless channel of everlasting love between the two. I laid there in total peace, feeling her love and sending mine back, curled up tight like I was a child in her arms again, smiling ear to ear. In my head I spoke, "I love you so much, Mum. I love you so very, very much. I'm so sorry for always fighting with you. I know you just want to see me happy. I know you only love me. I'm sorry, and I forgive you." "Tell her," the voice came back in again. "She needs to know." I had no objection. Like I did for my sister and father, I solemnly committed to sharing these feelings with her as soon as I had the chance, and I could not wait to do so. I could not wait to remove that wall of tension between us and make sure it never came back. I chuckled a little, thinking about the challenge ahead and helping her change her tone and delivery so we could stay in a more balanced relationship. Then paused for a moment to wonder why her default is to always be so short and snappy with me. With everyone, actually. Why does she automatically jump to belittling and bickering? It was like there was some sort of underlying thorn in her side, something that caused her to operate from a state of conflict and negativity despite having what appeared to be a happy life. As soon as I thought the thought, the medicine did what I'd come to expect and provided the answer. I was suddenly transformed back down into that little toddler again. This time, instead of walking into my sister's bedroom, I pushed open the bathroom door to see a vision that was so insanely familiar it was an image practically synonymous with my childhood. It was my mother, in her bathrobe, standing in front of the bathroom sink, looking in the mirror. My mom looking in the mirror, a vision so familiar and frequent in my early days. I literally saw it every single day of my life, yet it had completely vanished from my conscious mind. I watched like I always did, my eyes about level with her knees, her distinct burgundy bathrobe and matching slippers. I couldn't see her face too well, but I did see the curlers in her hair, exactly as expected. This routine was a customary part of the day that took up an unhealthy amount of time, something I recognized even as a young girl. She always seemed to be in the bathroom getting ready or putting her face on, as she called it. She had to be completely done up for every occasion, no matter how small, even for no occasion at all. I remember even being in the car before school in the mornings, waiting for her as she got ready to drop us off, a task she completed each morning without even getting out of the car or interacting with anyone. But it didn't matter. She had to be ready, God forbid someone caught a momentary glimpse of her. I was only semi-conscious of this normal reality, But now I could see that her appearance was the number one thing on her mind at all times. Always in her dresses and proper pantsuits, digging through her bottomless jewelry boxes and rummaging through her multiple closet shelves filled with shoes, trying on countless different arrangements before ever choosing one. It was all clicking for me now. The clothes, the jewelry, the shoes, the makeup, everything so perfect and proper all the time. It was almost like a mild sickness, more than mild, in fact, an infection of the soul. And now, as she ages, it has expanded to routine Botox injections and a bathroom counter covered wall to wall in skin creams and facial masks. Masks. That's literally what it is, a mask. She's afraid to be seen for who she really is. She's always hiding behind a mask. She valued her appearance above all things, yet simultaneously felt like no matter how much she tried, she was never enough. Back through the eyes of the toddler, I walked towards her slowly. As I approached, I knew exactly what was going to happen, but I couldn't stop. It kept unfolding on its own. Like I always did, I came upon her side and tugged lightly at the bathrobe, causing her, like she always did, to whip her head down at me and blurt, "What? What do you want?" Startled with fear, even though it was the reaction I always got when I interrupted her during this routine. I guess as a kid, I never learned not to do this because I could never make sense of why this would happen. But now I can see clearly that the anger and frustration was coming from somewhere else and merely being taken out on me, or whomever interrupted her. But why? Why such negative feelings when looking in the mirror? It was no secret that she was a very beautiful woman. People frequently complimented her on her looks throughout her entire life. In the next moment, the answer appeared as the vision changed. I was now standing at my adult height, behind her and a little to the left, looking into the mirror in a way which I could see her reflection, but not my own. I examined her face closely, and at first all I saw was her as I knew her, just her physical features. Then as I continued to stare, the distinct features of her face began to dissolve, and I was able to see far beyond the physical, and instead feel the energy that was really behind it. I saw a salty bitterness, stemming from constant comparison to other women, friends, strangers, and celebrities alike. I saw an anger at herself for what she thought was an inferior physique and beauty. I saw frustration over the daily battle to keep up her image as the beautiful woman people knew her for, and a heavy sadness inside that no matter how often she heard it, she could never see herself in that same way. Then I felt an explosion of pressure coming from all sides, a force so strong it made me feel claustrophobic, like the walls were closing in. I knew right away that this was the pressure she felt to be beautiful, and I was devastated by the severity of it. It was suffocating. As I interpreted the vision, the message evolved. I first thought that claustrophobic sensation was a representation of the external pressure put on by others, but quickly realized that wasn't the case. The feeling was an indication of the pressure she put on herself based on how she believed others judged her. It was a completely false and fabricated story that kept her in this perpetual state of lack. Just the mere notion that anyone else would have this sort of expectation was completely preposterous, and the idea that she still felt short of this imaginary metric was even more ridiculous. Nevertheless, this was her story. It was not true, but she told it to herself so many times and so convincingly that eventually it became her reality, and this was the thorn in her side. This was the nagging irritation at the root of her overbearing opinions and combative tendencies. This was the source of heat to the flames she threw at the people she loved. It was her own pain being redirected. As I connected these feelings and received these messages, her face in the mirror came back to her usual appearance, but it only lasted a moment before her face faded and my sister's image took its place. But once again, this only lasted a second before her image was replaced by that of my aunt, and then my mom's mother, my grandmother. The images swapped in and out of the three of them for several rotations, then expanded again, this time to my great-grandmother and her two sisters. Even though I had never really known them, and only ever seen one or two very old photos, I knew with every ounce of certainty that it was them. As these new faces came in, I noticed the walls of pressure were as present as ever, telling me this was not something only my mother experienced. The faces were rotating between the group of women when, once again, more faces appeared. This time it was my great-great-grandmother and her sister, and then her mother and her grandmother and their sisters, and then another layer of ancestors after that. I, of course, have never seen or met any of these women, but the faces were as recognizable as my own mother's. All the faces then blended together into one generic representation of my female bloodline, a beautiful face, yet expressing only pain and agony. The pressure wall was stronger than ever, and I knew they had each fought this same battle throughout their lives. The anguish on the face told me this was not only a difficult path for each of them to have walked, but that it was totally unnecessary and rippled out into every aspect of their lives, including into the lives of the ones they loved the most. I felt the weight of the outrageously unrealistic expectations of themselves and the devastating levels of disappointment when they don't meet them, not that they would ever allow themselves to feel like they met them anyway. It was a black cloud of insecurity that has hovered over our bloodline for centuries. As I stared at the face of blended features that clearly included every single one of the women, but looked like none of them specifically, it changed one more time. This time, to my surprise, it transformed into me. I froze in disbelief, but quickly succumbed to the fact that this was true. I was by no means an exception to this generational mindset of lack. In a single glimpse, I was able to see all of my mother's tendencies regarding her physical images also as my own. Granted, maybe not quite as extreme and expressed in my own unique set of tendencies, but nevertheless, at the core of the problem was the same limiting beliefs and self-sabotaging mentality. Not pretty enough. Not good enough. Not enough. Period. Doubt where there should be belief, insecurity where there should be pride, and lack where there should be love. Suddenly, as I looked at my own reflection in the mirror, all of my ancestors were now in the bathroom, standing behind me and all around me. Dozens and dozens of eyes looked over my shoulder, and a different type of pressure filled the room. This time, instead of judgment, I felt like I was being called upon. Nobody actually spoke, but one single unified message pulsated out of the group and into me. Now that you see it, what are you going to do? I felt every eyeball piercing into me, asking me to act, begging me to break the curse, but for some strange reason I resisted. I tried to somehow imagine myself without this struggle, but I couldn't. I couldn't even create the image in my mind of a version of me who lived above this. It clicked in that moment. This wasn't just a small habit change or a minor mindset shift. This was a spiritual wound that had been passed down for centuries. It was literally part of my DNA. It's who I am. Now that you see it, what are you going to do? I wanted to just let go and be different, but it was not nearly that simple. I felt something inside me that just wanted to cling on to the familiarity of this life, the life I knew, and resisted the new and unknown. Who would I be without these feelings? Who would I be without the fear? I saw the image of Kaitiki, free and proud, radiating confidence and striding through life with her head held high and her heart wide open. I tried to replace that same image with me, but I couldn't. I had all the wisdom of the universe running through me, telling and showing me it was possible, but I couldn't accept it. The doubts crept in, and my typical mirror self-talk reared its ugly head and tore me back down. I tossed and turned on the floor, half of me trying to let go and the other half clinging on for dear life, when I felt a set of hands on my back and shoulders. Coincidentally, it was Kaitiki. "Can I sit with you?" she asked. "You look like you might need some support." "Yes, please," I answered, keeping my eyes closed, not losing the image of the bathroom. "I'm trying to let go, like you always tell me. I'm trying to let go of my old story, but it's so hard. I can't." "You can," she answered. "You most certainly can." "I know it doesn't serve me, but it's just who I am," I responded. She kneeled next to me, placed her hand on my heart, and bowed her head in silence, connecting to my energy. "The ego clings to the familiar," she whispered in a low volume, yet with bold confidence. "It wants only what it already knows. It's only trying to protect you, but it keeps you small," she explained. "But you know the truth, Sandra. You know what you are really capable of. You know your true power." She put a little pressure on my heart with both of her hands. "And you know very well that if you want to evolve, you have to let the old version die." She was right. I did know that, but it still felt impossible. I was confused by the battle inside. I was now fully aware of what I needed to do, and I knew with 100% certainty that it was best for me. But the ego, as Kaitiki helped me identify, would not loosen its grip. It was too scared. Even though I knew there would only be positive benefits ahead, I was too afraid of the unknown. The battle raged inside, causing me a great deal of physical discomfort. Suddenly, everything was achy. I felt nauseous again, and I could not sit still. I was shaking and trembling and sweating. Panic was returning for the first time in many hours. Like no time had passed at all. I was now back in the bathroom, surrounded by my ancestors who were still awaiting my response. There was such an unusual energy coming from them. There was so much love pouring out of their hearts, telling me that I was loved no matter what I decided, no matter if I acted or not. And yet, there was this distinct knowing that they were not letting me off the hook without making a decision, without taking clear action and being honest about the person I was going to be now that I had this new perspective. The women ancestors that were to my right stepped back so I could see in that direction, and when I turned to look, I saw a young girl, maybe 5 years old, standing next to me, facing forward and looking into a much lower mirror. Because I was directly next to her, I couldn't see her face or her reflection, but I knew exactly who it was. This young girl was a faceless representation of the next generation, my future daughter. Her physical features were generic and nonspecific, but her energy made it obvious that she was of the same line. As she looked in the mirror, instead of seeing a beautiful young girl full of love and light, her body gave off distinct feelings of frustration and pain as she cast the same shadows of self-judgment as the rest of us, causing her aura to darken into a dense cloud of brown. "No," I yelled inside as I instantly burst into tears. "No, no, no. You are so beautiful. You are perfect." I dropped down to my knees and squeezed her with all of my might. "Don't you dare doubt yourself." I sobbed as I squeezed her tighter, begging her not to be fooled. "I love you so much." I wept heavily at the thought of my daughter succumbing to the same trap and same patterns as we all have. And as I felt the sadness fill every inch of my being, I got the message loud and clear. It's up to you to stop it. There was no hesitation. A call I was unable to answer for myself just minutes ago, I was now willing to commit to for her with no hesitation at all. I held her even tighter and pulled her head close to mine. In that moment, I felt, for the first time ever, what it feels like to be on the other side of the unconditional love of the mother. "I won't let this happen to you. I promise," I said to her. "I promise." Then I turned back to my ancestors and shouted, "This stops with me. This stops now." The energy of their presence did a complete 180 as they erupted in cheers and applause, rejoicing and honoring me for the decision being made. The sadness and sorrow transformed to jubilation and laughter as they joined arms and danced all around me and the young girl. The room enlightened with a glowing white light as I soaked in the energy of happiness. "It stops with me. It stops with me," echoed through my head over and over as the celebration continued, like a battle cry for all the women who came before me and all the women who would come after. A promise to the women of our family, past, present, and future. Still on my knees next to the young girl, I turned and looked forward into the low mirror, my head next to hers. To my surprise, in some complex twist of space and time that made absolutely no logical sense, yet perfectly presented the information I needed, the young girl was once again me. I froze. I was mesmerized. I hadn't seen this reflection in the mirror in decades, yet knew as well as my current face, and felt overwhelming pride. I realized that this reflection was from the last time period in my life that I was able to look in the mirror without the fears and limiting thought loops. And in that moment, I was finally able to know what it would feel like to look at myself in the mirror from a place of love instead of lack. It was happening. I was remembering who I really am. I allowed that feeling to sink deeply into my soul, committing to myself that this would be the only way I'd ever look in the mirror again. After sitting for several minutes and really letting that commitment sink in, I finally sat back up and gave Kaitiki a huge hug. "Thank you. Thank you so much." "Of course," she answered. "I don't know what you were working through, but I could sure see that it wasn't easy." "Now I know what it means to let the old me die," I answered. "There's no way around it. I was letting everything go. I was letting it all die." "Except the monkeys, I hope," she joked, to which we both burst out laughing. My laugh was rich and pure. It felt new. It felt authentic, like nothing was in the way. I laughed not just at the silly remark, but the ridiculousness of everything that just transpired over the last 6 or 8 or however many hours we've been in here. Once I finally caught my breath and calmed my giggles, I replied, "Yes, except the monkeys." The medicine was wearing off slowly, but I was still basking in the glow of it all. I was in a state of pure bliss, and even though the hard work was done for the day, the bliss continued to bring me important information as waves of universal wisdom flowed in and out through a steady stream of limitless clarity. Kaitiki, Kelly, and I all laid together in a puddle for at least an hour, enjoying some quiet yet profoundly deep conversation with each other about our experiences, until Pono announced that it was time to begin serving something called hape, another medicine that would help us ground. After this next ritual, the ceremony would officially be concluded, and we were invited to walk down to the beach if that sounded appealing, which it did, except I could have sworn it must have been midnight by now. Kaitiki gave me the rundown on hape, which she explained was an earthy blend of sacred tobacco, along with various roots and herbs all ground together into a powder. The powder was then loaded into something called a tepi, which was basically a long, hollow bone. Then, the hape is blown through the bone directly into one's nostrils. Kaitiki handed me a box of tissues and a bucket, informing me I'd probably need them. This made me a bit wary, but I wasn't about to start doubting the process now. I watched Pono get set to serve Kelly, the person on the female side of the room, as one of the male facilitators began getting set on the other side of the room. Just like Kaitiki explained, after a moment of silence, each facilitator scooped some of the hape into the long hollow bone and blew it directly up the left nostril of the recipient, followed by the right nostril. As I expected, it did not seem enjoyable, and the recipients immediately began dry heaving, spitting into the buckets and wiping snot off their noses. However, the ritual, like all of the rituals of this ceremony, was done with great honor and respect. As I watched each person go, it was almost like a rite of passage, each being honored for their work here today, and each reciprocating that respect back to the facilitators. Kaitiki leaned over to me again. Before I receive, I like to remind myself of the commitments I am making to myself once I leave here today. I like to cement the takeaways from the ceremony into stone through this process. Like a new line being drawn, once I receive this medicine, the old me is honored and released, and the new me is officially born into existence. Okay, got it, I answered. Pono prepared to serve Kaitiki as Kelly and the others gagged, snotted, and purged into buckets, which was oddly beautiful, especially as uplifting ceremonial songs played from the speakers in the background. I took a deep breath and prepared for my serving. Like she suggested, I began to process my intentions moving forward from here. I closed my eyes and reflected on the day, trying not to get too caught up in the micro details of experience and focused more on the major takeaways. First, I set my intention to do exactly what Pono had taught me at the beginning of the week: live from the inside out. Each day moving forward will start with the practice of getting my mind, body, and spirit in full coherence so I can move forth into the world from my most complete state. My own alignment is the only thing that is within my control, and from there, I will be my best, and that's what the world really needs, each of us at our best. The next promise to myself was to say the things that needed to be said to the people closest to me, my family. I love them so dearly despite our occasional challenges and differences, and I need to make that known right away. I know the conversations might not be easy, but they are important and I'm ready to have them. Lastly was my commitment to myself and all the women of my lineage. It stops with me. Gone are the limiting beliefs that have held us back and hindered our relationships for centuries. It's time for radical change. I'm no longer just straight-A Sandra, the science nerd, known only for her brains and nothing more. I'm Sandra. Not Sandra or Sandy. I'm Sandra Steiner, and I'm right here for the world to see. In my fullest, taking up my space and living the life I deserve. No apologizing, no compromising, no half-stepping, no bullshit. I took a deep breath and opened my eyes to see that Pono was already kneeling in front of me. I was a bit startled, but settled right in as I mimicked her position and came knee to knee. She poured a small round of the medicine into her palm and then scooped it into the tepi. She touched the tepi to my heart, causing me to sit taller as a rush of energy rippled through me. I was nervous, but ready. I opened my eyes and looked directly into hers. Our gazes immediately locked tight, like a magnetic force was pulling them in line with one another and connecting us to each other's soul. "You're a queen," she said boldly as a rush of adrenaline shot up my spine. "No more hiding." Without breaking eye contact or changing my expression, I gave one single nod of my head, signifying my acceptance of both the compliment and the command. As we continued to stare, Pono's face started to morph again like it did very early on in the ceremony. As the face changed in front of my eyes, it was like looking into a time portal, whereas in her face I could see the face of every woman who has ever lived and every woman who will ever live, molded into one singular representation of the entire species of woman. It was so overwhelmingly powerful, and like many things today, felt like I had seen it 1,000,000 times before, with this distinct look of interdimensional familiarity. It was dark and blank, yet at the same time the most beautiful face I had ever seen, with the wisdom of every woman who has ever lived behind her eyes, and the essence of the divine feminine glowing in her aura. It was ancient, It was angelic. It was all-knowing. It was heavenly and earthly. It was primordial. Our eyes remained locked so tight that I barely even noticed she had moved until I felt the tepi lightly touching my left nostril. Again, I felt like I was stepping into a new world through this ritual, a rite of passage, an initiation. Where I was going next was not clear, but all I know is that wherever I'm headed, today was the most important step on the journey of preparation. I knelt tall, like a spiritual warrior accepting her calling. She took a big breath in. Shoo! The powder shot through my nostrils with tremendous force and exploded into my skull. My head jerked back in reaction like someone punched me right in the nose. I frantically reached for the bucket and spit violently inside several times, with a few gags mixed between as I struggled to take full breaths. My mind went completely blank. I was immediately taken into the ultra-present tense as the painful sensation in my nose, head, and throat became the only thing I could possibly notice. After a few moments of extreme discomfort, I took one more spit, wiped my nose with the back of my hand, and sat back up to receive the next dose. Pono, apparently not fully satisfied with my posture, lifted my chin with her finger and tapped me on the sternum, cueing me to sit up taller in a more powerful presentation. No hiding, she reminded me again. With my eyes tearing up and snot dripping down, I nodded again. The distinct warrior energy returned as the tepi entered my right nostril. She gasped another big breath in. Shoo! Somehow this one hurt more than the first, and I rushed my head back into the bucket as quickly as I could, gagging so loud it echoed across the whole room. I saw visuals of dark brown earth and sand dripping down my visual field like a landslide, and I could taste the energy of Mother Earth in the roots and herbs. My body felt like it gained 50 pounds as my energy lowered and anchored me to the floor, grounding me so quickly that a wave of nausea moved through me once again. After another moment of struggle, I hawked one huge mouthful of saliva, pulled my head out of the bucket, strengthened my spine, opened my chest, stared Pono right in the eyes, and said 2 words I've said thousands of times in my life, but never truly meant them in any way close to the way I meant them today. Thank you. She leaned over and kissed me right in the middle of my forehead, then came back to my eye level and simply replied, Thank you.
I hate to interrupt such a dramatic episode, but I had to jump on today to talk about primordial medicine retreats. Obviously, the topic of sacred medicines is sensitive, but there's certainly a conversation that needs to be had. Maybe Sandra's experience is the first you've heard about these types of ceremonies, or maybe you've been hearing about them all over the place. Either way, it's important to know that there's a wide degree of styles and formats available out there, and finding the one for you is not always easy. If you feel that plant medicine has been calling to you, but you are not sure where to start, who to trust, or what to do first, a primordial medicine retreat may be the perfect answer for you. Our first retreat in 2025 was an absolutely unbelievable experience for all those who attended, and one of the most profound and deep experiences of my personal journey to date, if not the most. Looking ahead, the plan is to not only have more consistent offerings, but provide the most professional and honorable experience available to modern lifestyle humans. That means thorough education, preparation, and integration, with loving support and guidance each step of the way. Unfortunately, this isn't always the quality of offering that you may find, and primordial medicine aims to not only create the highest quality experience, but set the new standard for safety, setting, and support in the realm of plant medicine retreats. Maybe it's time for you to take this step on your journey. Maybe it's not. But if and when that time comes, you'll know where to look first. And if we can't deliver exactly what you need at this stage of your journey, we'll help guide you towards someone who can. I'm sure it goes without saying that there's much more to talk about inside. See you in the club.
I was feeling much more grounded after the hape, but as we exited the Maloka, I was still in an extremely elevated state of consciousness. All of the elements of nature seemed to have an extra layer of life to them as the colors popped and the sounds echoed with a touch of magic I wouldn't normally recognize. Just about everybody opted to take the walk down to the beach, but the group energy was a little mixed by this point. Some were beaming with happiness and joy as they conversed loudly with a skip in their step. Others were noticeably fatigued and chose to hang back a few feet and walk a little slower. I was somewhere in the middle. I was very tired, no doubt about it, but I was still so sharp and clear my mind wanted to stay in it and process everything. I figured I would just sit and relax on the beach and allow myself to keep slowly returning back to the physical dimension. As we stepped onto the sand, the group dispersed even more, with some running toward the water, some walking along the shoreline, and others, like me, finding a quiet place to sit and think. I sat on the sand and looked around at the beautiful scene while an extraordinary sensation of gratitude came upon me. I thought about what a wild week it had been and honestly could not think of a better way to describe it other than a journey of transformation, just like Pono had said when I first arrived. I laughed to myself, remembering how I reacted to that term on the first day. If only I had known. As the gratitude flowed abundantly through me, I had a realization about what gratitude really is. I had always thought of gratitude as a temporary gesture, like showing thanks to someone who has done something helpful. And while that's part of it, I could now see that gratitude is actually a state of being. I felt gratitude as a distinct energy in which I could act from, a perspective from which I could see the world through, not just a single action, but for all the blessings of life, not just in momentary glimpses, but always. I know that it won't be easy to maintain this elevated state, but I sat for a few moments and really let the feelings sink deeply into my body, mind, and soul. I imagined myself absorbing the frequency into all of my cells and downloading a new program into my operating system. Gratitude. As I did this, my thoughts returned to my family. I was so incredibly thankful for the work I did today and how I was able to understand them in a new way. I never would have thought, after all of these years, that I had so much to learn about my own family. But the medicine showed me another side of our relationships that will be invaluable moving forward. I thought about the commitments I had made to each of them and how eager I was to return home and see them all. Return home. The voice, although not as strong as it was a few hours ago, echoed these words to me. Return home. I envisioned myself walking through the door of my parents' house, hugging each of them tightly, sharing my new insights, and then cuddling up on the family couch in the living room. Even though I had moved out quite a few years ago, that house will always be my place of comfort, my home, and in this moment the thought of being there was all I could think about. The visions of my return home became more vivid, and the yearning to be home intensified. I scanned the scenery a few more times, remaining thankful for everything Okablaya had brought me, and simultaneously began accepting the reality that it was time to go. It was perfect. I felt as much love and gratitude for what has been, with equally as much love and excitement for what is to come next. It was official. My time here in Okablaya was over, and I have no regrets. I am ready to leave. I stood up slowly and walked down to the water's edge where several others were gathered. Kaitiki and Pono were nearby, and a few others were now splashing around in the shoreline. I lingered slightly outside of the group as I was enjoying the moment in my own space and not necessarily ready to mingle just yet. I stopped and stood right at the very edge of the water, where the waves were finishing their journey toward the land and washing back out to the sea. I took a few moments to just observe the motion of the water gently lapping against my feet and ankles, moving a small amount of sand as they did. I felt my feet begin to sink deeper into the sand as the water repeatedly moved in and out. Soon, my feet were almost completely submerged in the sand, helping me feel even more grounded and connected to the energy of Mother Earth. I stood there and just allowed myself to tap into the energy of both the ocean and the earth, a feeling of both pleasure and power. Then I practically gasped as I saw out of the corner of my eye that the moon was now visible in the darkening sky. Her beauty was breathtaking, a magnificent waning gibbous moon glowing with silver light. This added another level to the experience of pleasure and power that was already rising through me, and I took a second to acknowledge and give thanks to each of these power sources. The firm stability of the earth, the calm fluidity of the ocean, and the cleansing glow of the moon. As I finished my round of gratitude, I lifted my head and looked out onto the horizon, where I became instantly entranced by the most breathtaking of all, the light of the sun. My body locked into a state of extreme stillness as I peered into the deep golden orange rays, the deepest and most beautiful glow I have ever witnessed. Like earlier, my spine instinctively lengthened as if the light was activating a power source inside of me, and my chest opened proudly to receive the warmth and love. I held this position of honor as I stared down the long golden streak of light that danced off the top of the water directly toward me, just like Kaitiki had pointed out to me this morning. Suddenly, as I reflected on Kaitiki's words from this morning, I was taken back to them in a new way. What went over my head the first time now detonated an internal explosion of energy. I could now feel, without any hindrance, that this source, this infinite source of love and light, was aimed right at me and showering me with its eternal and divine power. Actually, it wasn't a feeling or a thought. It was a knowing. It was an unbreakable flow of consciousness that penetrated my eyes and saturated my soul, providing me the strength, courage, guidance, and wisdom to be and do anything and everything I could want in this life and every lifetime after. And now I understood what Kaitiki meant, because it was not just for me, it was for everyone, for all living beings, everywhere, always. I saw myself as the center of the universe, the most significant living creature in all of creation, tied for first with every other creature that ever has and ever will walk the planet. I was embodying the definition of what infinite actually means, a concept my logical brain could never quite make sense of, but now enveloped my entire being, causing me to tremble with emotion. The potency of the power kept amplifying, causing my knees to buckle and my head to wobble. I looked down at my feet to try and keep my balance and put my hands on my knees for a moment. I took a few deep breaths to try and hold it together, but my body could hardly withstand the emotional overload. Finally, I picked my head back up and regained eye contact with the sun. For it, nothing had changed. This was just another moment in time, neither more or less significant than any other moment. It just kept moving steadily along, like it does every single day, has done every single day, and will do every single day until the end of time, further solidifying the image in my mind of its endless provision of unconditional love. These truths sunk in so deep I felt dizzy, overwhelmed by the power and the beauty of it all. Like back in the Maloka, I began fading into the void of eternal oneness. In a daze, I pulled my feet out from the small pools of sand and water they had sunken into, trying to keep my balance, but the epiphany just kept intensifying. I saw us each as children, loved to no end and provided for without limitation, dancing with the flow of nature as fractals of this infinite source. Fractals of source. I saw the water, the sand, the sky, the moon, and of course the sun, as pieces of a divine realm that gift life to this entire plane of existence. I saw how it all exists in perfect synchronicity and creates an environment of harmony in which we are created in its image of perfect balance. It was all nature. It was all sacred. It was all love. It was all God. My knees buckled so hard they gave out and I collapsed to the ground, weeping uncontrollably. It wasn't that I couldn't believe it. It was that I couldn't believe I ever didn't believe it. I threw my head to the sand and bawled even harder. Internally, I paradoxically felt the desire to beg for forgiveness, yet understood with absolute certainty that there was no need to whatsoever. I am already forgiven. I am loved no more or less than I ever was up until this moment, despite my unwillingness to see the truth. Kaitiki and Pono rushed to my side and tried to assist me. They each scooped one of my arms in an attempt to help me to my feet, but it was no use. My body went completely limp as I fell back to the sand, sobbing vigorously. Eventually, they were able to help me to a kneeling position where I flopped into Pono's arms. She sat in the sand and supported me. No words were spoken. It was as if they knew exactly what was happening. They just comforted me and soothed me until the crying stopped and I was able to make my way to standing. We walked back up the beach just far enough to be out of the water and then sat back down on dry sand. The sun had disappeared below the horizon, but there was still a decent amount of lingering light helping us see. Finally, after many minutes of silence, I said to Pono, "I just want to go home." "Sandra, I know you had a very overwhelming day, but you can't run away from this. You know that." No, not like that," I answered. "I'm not running away. If anything, I'm running toward." They both gave me a look as if they didn't understand. I've been running away from God my whole life without realizing it. I was denying the truth even though it was right in front of me, I said. And now I've learned, and I know what I need to do. I scanned my head back and forth to both sides, giving them each a sincere glance. I'm ready. They both embraced me in a group hug that made me feel so proud. I want to see my family. Some things need to be said. There is work that needs to be done, I continued while we hugged. I cannot do anything until I address these matters and strengthen the relationships that are most important to me, the relationships that are me. They nodded in agreement. This was the most important week of my entire life. I will never be the same after this, and you two are the biggest reasons why, I said to them as I lifted my arms around their shoulders and pulled them in close. I will never forget my time in Okablaya, and I will never forget either of you. We held our embrace for a few moments before Pono spoke. Remember that there is no rush. You are welcome to stay and enjoy the festival, or just rest in my home as long as you need, she said kindly. I smiled politely and nodded. I know, thank you, but I choose to go home now. Okay then, Pono answered, respecting my decision. You'll be on the first flight out tomorrow morning.